GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
Have you noticed that more and more stores are closing? Well, last year, apparently 13,000 stores closed for the last time on the high street.
Well, experts warn the worst is still to come for our small businesses.
Well, let's talk to retail expert Jeremy Baker. Good morning to you, Jeremy. How bad is it and what can be done?
Well, nothing can be done about it. Retail is like that. It's boom and bust operation. So last year, let's say you had a shop and it was booming. This year, the consumer can just change their mind. They don't need to come back to your shop ever again.
Well, it is sad, Jeremy, because our high streets are the beating heart of our communities, aren't they? And for many people, I know I can relate to my high street, it is such a depressing sight, walking down there and seeing them all boarded up and closed down.
But how often do you walk down the boarded up high street? I think people move on to something else. The online world is very big. Yeah. And lots of other things are very exciting. And so people, the shop, I like to go to my GP in a shopping centre and get my tests done there rather than tramp off all the way to the GP, for example. And children could go to little schools in the high street. I've seen that happen already. So lots of things could happen to the high street. It could be much more a social centre. Much more kind of like pubs, coffee shops, all that. Charities. I don't see anything wrong with charities taking over, but the idea of the shop-centred high street finished, that's gone. Never coming back. Goodbye. It's not sad, it's just life.
GB News, the People's Channel.
A very, very good afternoon to you. It's 3 p.m. Welcome to the Martin Daubney Show here on GB News. We're broadcasting for you live from the heart of Westminster and all across the UK. On today's show, astonishing data released today predicts that the UK will be flooded with almost 10 million additional immigrants in the next 8 years, swelling the population to 72.5 million. On today's show, I'll be joined by heavy hitters Lee Anderson and Ben Habib and Matthew Stadlen to ask them, is it time to declare a state of immigration emergency? And a shock new report by the Children's Commissioner has found that none of the under-18s arrested in last summer's riots were spurred on by misinformation, racism or other right-wing influences. So why on earth did Sir Keir Starmer and the entire government and establishment media machine make this baseless and inflammatory claim? Talking of which, a leaked Home Office report today claims that right-wing extremists frequently exploit the grooming gang scandal, which should be renamed as alleged group-based sexual abuse to promote anti-Muslim sentiment. What a load of cobblers. I'll be joined by the Police and Crime Commissioner to ask her of the Home Office losing the plot. And should the United Kingdom follow Donald Trump's lead and leave the World Health Organization? Well, one of the country's top oncologists, Dr. Carol Sikora, a former director of the WHO cancer program, sensationally claims it stinks. It is not serving Britain well. We should leave. All of that on today's action-packed show. Bye. To my left, I've got two gentlemen, the best of enemies, Lee Anderson and Matthew Stadlen, waiting for the fur to fly. The astonishing data out today, simply mind-blowing, uncontrolled border experiment. Well, that's what Keir Starmer called it. The data confirms it. 10 million immigrants expected to arrive on these shores by 2032. Have we lost control? Have we lost the plot? Can any of them ever take back control of our borders? Don't forget, 5 years this week was when we finally left the European Union. Send your views and your comments to gbnews.com/your say. But before we kick into the main event, here's your headlines with Sam Francis.
Martin, thank you very much and good afternoon to you. 2 minutes past 3. Well, as we heard at the top of the hour, the UK population could hit 72.5 million people by 2032, driven almost entirely by net migration, according to new predictions from the ONS. Statisticians now predict net migration will contribute 340,000 extra people each year from 2028. That's up 315,000 from earlier estimates. The government, though, says it will present a comprehensive plan to reduce what it calls staggeringly high migration levels, but has ruled out a fixed cap. Well, the Shadow Home Secretary Chris Philp told us earlier that the projected 10 million arrivals over the next decade is unacceptable and must be stopped.
Forecasts the ONS put out are completely unacceptable. They don't need to happen and they should not happen. What Kemi Badenoch and I have said is there should be a legally binding annual cap on the number of visas that we issue to get these numbers right down. You know, we have 9 million working age people here in the UK that are not in the workforce. We need to see those people getting to work, and we need to see more investment in technology and mechanisation instead of importing very large numbers of low-skill wages. That is not the right thing to do. We need to see change, and we've got a plan to do that.
Chris Philp there speaking to us earlier. In other news, the driver of a car that crashed into a school tea party, killing 2 8-year-old girls, has been rearrested on suspicion of causing death by dangerous driving. Claire Fremantle was previously told she wouldn't face charges after suffering an epileptic seizure that caused that crash at the Study Preparatory School in Wimbledon. The Met Police, though, has reopened its investigation following concerns from the families of Nuria Sajjad and Selina Lau. Their parents say it's vital the investigation continues in pursuit of what they've described as truth and full facts. An inquest jury has ruled the helicopter crash that killed 5 people at Leicester City's King Power Stadium in 2018 was an accident. The football club's chairman and the pilot of the aircraft were among those who died. Jurors found the helicopter was properly maintained and the pilot took all possible steps to regain control. The coroner said the loss will be felt by families and the Leicester community forever. She's now considering a report to prevent future accidents. A leaked Home Office report calls for police to record more non-crime hate incidents, despite previous orders to stop over free speech concerns. It dismisses claims of two-tier policing as a right-wing extremist narrative. The review ordered by the Home Secretary also describes grooming gangs as an alleged problem frequently exploited by the far right. Well, Shadow Business Secretary Andrew Griffiths told us the report's conclusion is disturbing.
The Home Secretary needs to publish this immediately so that we can all see for ourselves what and who it is that's saying these non-crime hate incidents, these attack and waste of police resources, something a Conservative Home Secretary stopped. And there's clearly a cell within the Home Office that is not concerned about ordinary crime, ordinary policing, in favour of this ideological approach to non-crime hate incidents. They're wrong. That's not where we should be putting our police resources. And the Home Secretary needs to come to Parliament today, publish this report and explain who it is that keeps coming up with this idea.
Well, the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, has also responded to that report. He says when it comes to extremism, it's important to focus resources on the threats faced by the UK.
I think when it comes to extremism, it's very important that we are focused on the threat so we can deploy our resource properly, and therefore we're looking carefully at where the key challenges are. Obviously, that's now informed with what I said last week in the aftermath of the Southport murders, where we've got the additional challenge, I think, of a sort of cohort of loners who are extreme. And they need to be factored in. So that's the focus. In the end, what this comes down to is safety and security of people across the United Kingdom, and that's my #1 focus.
The ethics chief of the British Medical Association has told MPs that doctors must be able to opt out of assisted dying at any stage. Andrew Green says it's vital their position is respected as evidence is currently being heard on the controversial bill. If passed, it would allow terminally ill adults in England and Wales to request help ending their life. Earlier, Professor Sir Chris Whitty warned that patients mustn't face a bureaucratic thicket when making that choice. MPs voted in favour of the bill in November, but it still faces months of scrutiny and further votes. And Donald Trump says the rise of Chinese AI company DeepSeek is a wake-up call for the US tech industry. The firm claims its model rivals US giants like OpenAI, but at a fraction of the cost. The news wiped billions off Wall Street, with Nvidia suffering the biggest one-day loss in history. But the US president said China's AI growth might actually be a positive for America.
The release of DeepSeek AI from a Chinese company should be a wake-up call for our industries that we need to be laser-focused on competing to win.
That's the news on GB News. I'll be back with you in around half an hour. Now, though, it's over to Westminster and Martin.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Sam. Now, astonishing figures out today because the UK's population is set to rocket to 72.5 million by mid-2032. Don't forget, that's only just over 7 years away. The projection released today by the Office for National Statistics is driven almost entirely by net migration, with a 5 million net increase in the next 10 years. Now, let's bring in GB News political editor Chris Hope, and I'm also joined in the studio by Reform UK's MP for Ashfield, Lee Anderson, and the political commentator Matthew Stadlen. I predict the fur is going to fly. Before that, Chris Hope, let's look at the data. Mind-blowing data. 5 years ago this Friday, we voted to finally leave the European Union. Take back control was the mantra, increasingly looking like a lie that we're all sold. These figures blow it out of the water. 4.9 million net. But hidden within that, 9.9 million immigrants coming in. Almost 10 million coming in by 2032. Nobody voted for this. Nobody wants this. What on earth is going on?
Well, I think you're wrong to blame Brexit. I think this is done with the connivance of the last Tory government. They had the controls to control net migration and chose not to. That is the point. Illegal migration is something which is apparently uncontrollable from the Tory government and looking like the Labour government. But these numbers are simply a litany of a failure of a Tory government which said it would cap net migration at fewer than 100,000 a year and failed to, and failed through, I think, 4 elections. They have fought on a policy of bringing it down or capping it, and didn't work. Look at these numbers here. 4.9% million increase between 2022 and 2032. Average level of projected migration, 340,000 a year. That's projected, not predicted. Projected because it's based on current government policy. So it is possible for this government to pull it back. They've got a white paper published in a few weeks' time. That's meant to be further controls on net migration.
Well, that'll sort it all out. Well, they'll bring a white paper out. Might as well bring a white flag. 6 months so far, Martin. Give them a chance. But the Tory party is saying it can and must be stopped from materialising. Well, some would argue that the Tories have lost all right to comment on net migration, given their failure for 14 years. Nigel Farage, the Reform UK leader, and Lee Anderson's party leader, says our quality of life is deteriorating due to the population explosion. What he means by that is that GDP per capita is not improving. So bringing in more cheap labour, undercutting British jobs, doesn't make us all richer, although the overall pie gets bigger, but we are poorer individually. That's the problem here. And just finally, the PM and Rachel Reeves out today talking about growth. They're going to try and get hold of defined benefit schemes, use that money, £160 billion in there to spend on growth. Apparently, I've talked to this expert this morning, that won't be a problem if the benefit schemes fall into deficit. That the trustees should have dealt with that problem by now. It was a problem 20 years ago. And all new government policies coming from the Cabinet must have at the heart a commitment to grow. If they're not going to grow the economy, they could be rejected by the PM. So all eyes on growth into tomorrow. This cannot possibly grow the economy. Not long term, because if you look at the types of people...
Well, it can do, that's the point. But individually,
it doesn't grow the economy in terms of GDP per capita.
Well, that's it.
If you flood the
overall,
economy with loads of Deliveroo drivers and low-skilled labour, that's ostensibly, let's be honest, the vast majority of immigrants to this country are low-skilled, non-EU countries. The facts are the facts, the same is the same across continental Europe. These are not brain surgeons. The tiny minority of them, of desirable immigrants from America, from South Africa, from Australia, the whole world wants them. They're a tiny tiny amount. The huge amount aren't a net benefit to the economy. The facts are the facts. When are they going to wake up to this?
Well, they do. About 6 times, a spokesman for the PM called it staggeringly high. They do blame the past Tory government correctly. They have failed, and they recognise the need to do it. But going back to your original point, Brexit Day Friday is nothing to do with it. And Brexit gave the power back to the government to control net migration. They haven't done it, and that's on the Tories.
I wasn't blaming Brexit. Brexit was the opportunity.
Yeah.
We were sold the illusion of control. My point is they never actually did it. Let's get this to the panel now, and let's get to Lee Anderson. Lee, you're sort of foaming at the mouth in the corner there. I can hear you.
Can I just say I've never sat quite this close to Lee Anderson.
You're enjoying it, aren't you?
I'm very glad that I've been doing my pull-ups.
You're wearing your red tie, he's wearing his blue tie.
And thank goodness for that, Martin. Look, I mean, this must be an AI version of the chopper, because I actually agree with probably all that he's said so far. So there's something going off there. There must be a glitch in the system, Chopper.
It's been hacked by the Chinese.
He is quite right that migration has been out of control. It started with Blair. It went to the Tory government were actually worse, and it looks like it's going to continue under this government. And you're quite right, Martin. Nobody in this country voted for it. It's making us all poorer. Chopper is half right when he says it does sort of grow the economy, but we're less productive. And I was always taught, even in basic economics at school, the way you become more productive in this country is to do more with less people. And what we're actually doing is we're doing more, but with a lot more people. We see nail bars opening, barber shops opening. We see all these fast food places. We see Deliveroo. You can't shift on the streets of London for people cycling about, delivering pizzas and hot dogs. These aren't contributing towards the economy. They're taking far more out than they're actually paying in. It's an absolute nonsense. These lunatics over here that work in Parliament, and I sit with them, I've been sat there this morning, they haven't got a clue. Well, I mean, if the cat fits, Matthew, we don't know, it probably does. But these lunatics over there haven't got a clue what it's like to live in the real world. They're not queuing up for a doctor's appointment, they don't have to pull their own teeth out, they're not queuing up for a council house, and they're not bothered about, they're not worried about what school the kids are going to go to, because they probably go to a private school. It's absolutely disgusting. We're letting the country down, and that place should hang its head in shame.
Matthew Stadlen, over to you. The Labour Party have to do something about this. We can blame the Conservatives historically all we like. That's done. We are where we are. This is a forward-looking, massive problem. Labour Party got to act.
No, there's no doubt immigration is a very difficult and complicated and nuanced issue, and a broad brush stroke is potentially damaging to the country. I don't know whether it's still your policy, Lee, but Richard Tice, in the build-up to the election, was talking about essentially, not his words, mine, running the country like a nightclub, one in, one out. That doesn't pay attention to the fluctuating needs of a society. Now, is immigration too high? In my view, and it is just one view, I think it is too high. I think the pace of change in recent years has been too fast.
Have you been hacked by the Chinese AI as well?
But we have problems, right? I can understand, although it's not nice for them, I can understand why if you have to bring people in to help us with our NHS and social care, they don't necessarily have to bring dependents. OK?
Yes.
Not as nice for them, but I can't see how if you're bringing someone in to make the health service work better, and they then bring more people who might need to use their NHS, that doesn't quite compute to me. Similarly with students, I cannot understand, and this has changed as well, these two things changed in the latter days of the Tory administrations, I can't understand why students were able to bring dependents.
Yeah.
That just doesn't make any sense. Well, the reason is because universities say they would collapse without it. Well, I'm sorry, they've got to get their budgets in order without relying on the dependence of overseas students.
I can't believe this. I'm agreeing with Matthew Stadlen.
Yeah, but hang on, but it's the tone of the debate, I think, that partly matters, because there'll be a lot of people watching GBNews today, and there are millions of people around the country who have come in from abroad to make our country better. And so when we're talking about immigration, when we're talking about immigration, Lee, let's not slag off whole tranches of our population. Because you don't need to do that. Let's have a grown-up conversation about it.
Let's be grown up. People have not come into this country to make our country better. They've come into this country. No, they haven't. Of course they have. They haven't, Matthew. They've come into this country to make their lives better.
Well,
they don't give a toss about people like me or you.
Two things can be true at the same time. The people who helped my dad die a dignified death and helped me change his pads when he was dying dying from asbestos poisoning.
Where were they from?
They were all of them, to a man and a woman, from other countries.
Which countries? Which countries?
Mostly African countries.
So why aren't they stopping in their own country?
And they
help their own people?
Because presumably the pay is better here, and because people here aren't doing
just
it.
Answered the argument.
Yes, but they're also helping us, Lee.
Matthew, what we're doing?
They are giving us labour.
We are brain draining countries like Africa, India and the subcontinent, and we're taking their best doctors, their surgeons, their nurses, and we bring them over here, and it is wrong.
And why are we doing it?
These people should stay in their own country and help their own country develop and get better.
Ideally, absolutely agree with you. But in order for that to happen, because you are somebody who wants to look after British interests first,
yes, I do.
As am I, in order for that to happen, we have to have people who are prepared to do those sorts of jobs. And I'm not just talking about doctors here, I'm talking about people who are prepared to change the pads of our parents when they are dying. And if we don't have those people, or if we're not paying them enough, right, then we're going to have to bring people in from abroad.
We don't. We've got millions of people in this country economically inactive, on the dole, doing nothing, sat at home all day watching TV.
People back into work?
Stop the benefits, Matthew.
What, so they're lining the streets. Like if you drive from Mumbai airport into the centre of Mumbai, you have whole families, hundreds, if not thousands of them,
in the world,
on the streets.
In the world,
do you want that to happen in this country?
In the world of Matthew Stadlen, everybody sat at home now, eating pizza, mental health problems, watching the TV and not going to work. Is that what you want?
No, it's not what I want.
Go to work, Matthew,
no, it's not what I want.
And contribute towards society. It's nonsense.
But it is a balance to strike, because you can't pretend that mental health and physical health do not exist.
Go to work, do a job, pay,
do exist.
Contribute towards society.
Ideally, absolutely.
All right,
what are your policies other than blaming immigrants?
Gents, that's the next question. What is the answer to this? We can all moan each other about this till
I'll give you one answer. I'll give you one answer.
You go first. You go first. What do we do?
Train up British people, because there's a whole range of different jobs that we're talking about, right?
Yes.
And if you want to get your food delivered, and I don't, I actually bother to use my legs and go and get it. Lee's right. Yeah. London is a much more difficult place to get around because of people charging around on delivery bikes and delivery mopeds. It's also more dangerous, in my view. Now, do we need that? I would suggest no, we don't need those sorts of services. And I can tell you one thing: if we do away with immigration, so you don't get people from abroad to do them, we're not going to get English people darting around risking their lives on these bikes. Okay, well, so we may find some agreement. That may find some agreement. Another solution, by the way, to this is that the government needs to get tougher on illegal immigration. Right? I'm not blaming the individuals themselves. They, as Lee accepts, want to come here at least in part for a better life themselves. But you have to have a rules-based system. Okay. And the politics of this is, if Labour doesn't get a grip on legal migration and illegal migration quite quickly in the next few years, never mind what the Tories did in the past, I think they will lose the next election, because a lot of people care about it. And by the way, although a lot of racists are out there and do use these sorts of stories to further their racist agenda and hide behind them, there are a lot of people who are not racist, but who think the pace of change is too quickly, is going too quickly. They can't get the services that they want.
OK, Lee Anderson, you've been waiting patiently. Have a quick go.
Well, I mean, again, I find myself agreeing with a lot of what Matthew says. I mean, there's something in the air today. I'm agreeing with Chopper and Matthew Stadlen on GBNews. It's unbelievable.
You're not paid to agree with each other, lads.
The solution, it's not... Politics is not complicated. This is not a complicated issue.
This is complex,
It's not.
It's deeply complicated.
It's not complicated.
How do you get those people back in? You'll just take the benefits away.
I'll ask you one question. If Nigel Farage becomes PM in 2029, as the polls say might happen as the biggest party in a coalition of Tories and Reform, according to that poll we find out now last week, what is your policy on net migration? Would you pursue the nightclub model, the one-in, one-out model?
I would love to have that sort of model.
And how would that possibly work?
Just pay attention, guys. You might learn something today. I know you might get it through your thick heads.
You've got 20 seconds. I'm getting told off.
We have got millions of people in this country doing nothing. We've got people coming into this country on low-skilled jobs, paying hardly any income tax, national insurance, they're earning 20 minimum wage jobs, they're paying nothing in, they're bringing loads of their family members in, they are a drain on our society, they are costing a fortune. Get these people, let's go back in time, a time when...
It's Dickens time.
No. Let's go back to the 60s, 70s and 80s. Go to bloody work.
OK, on that bombshell, we've got to leave it there. Thank you very much, Lee Anderson. Thank you very much, Matthew Stadlen. Crop Chopper, always a pleasure, never a chore. Fantastic start to the show. Now, time is running out. It's not only on this lot, but on your chance to become our biggest ever giveaway winner with an incredible 50 grand in your bank account. And that's totally tax-free moolah to spend however the dickens you like. Make sure you don't miss out.
There's just 3 days left to grab your chance to win our biggest cash prize so far, £50,000 in tax-free cash. How would you react if you won?
It's such a nice feeling.
Just go for it.
It's one text, and if I can win, anyone can win.
I was on cloud nine.
I'd say don't hesitate, do it.
For another chance to win £50,000 cash, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. You can call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB10 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Don't miss out, as lines close on Friday. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Now, a new report claims that children joined the riots that followed the Southport attacks simply for fun. Absolute nonsense, and I'll tell you why in a minute. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Headliners on GB News 11 p.m. every night. It's got 3 top comedians going through the next day's newspapers so you don't have to read them, which is great.
That's a good point. He's lying. I mean, maybe he's not lying.
That's Headliners every night from 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. as well on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
We were talking earlier about the issue of Siri listening to you. Well, it's not just your own conversations being sort of harvested for data, but it's a problem with AI. So what seems to have happened yesterday is that Apple issued a alert saying that Luke Littler had won the darts before he had. I mean, imagine what would, if he then gone on to lose, how that would have looked. I mean, obviously, because he went on to win, at least they got the story right, but before it had happened. So what it seems to happen is that the AI farms existing stories, and what it has done, that's the alert. We can see the alert there now, and it also claiming that Brazilian tennis player Rafael Nadal had come out as gay when actually a different Brazilian tennis player was actually mentioned in the original story. So what it does is you see that's branded as BBC Sport. What the Apple AI system does is it farms alerts that it thinks people are getting from the source and then summarises them into one. That's going to be my question. Into one alert.
Looks to me like you would assume, OK, the BBC are reporting this.
Absolutely.
So the BBC News might be saying something else.
So it could happen to any news organisation.
This has highlighted a massive issue. I mean, having editorial judgment and quality control, because if this is going on, it's just contributing to the flow of misinformation. Yes. And we know that this is a problem on social media, people reporting false things. But if it seems to come from trusted news sources, that is a massive issue in credibility. I mean, if you had something like Reuters, who's a big news provider, doing this, you could hold people accountable, you could make changes, but when it's the AI doing it, I mean, what do? You're going to have to reprogram it in some way.
And if you just lost control, if you're a news source, you've lost control of what goes out, because it basically farms it, puts your logo on it and sends it out even when it's nonsense.
GB News, the People's Channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Welcome back. 3:27 with me, Martin Daubney, here on GB News. Now, the Children's Commissioner says that teenagers got involved in the summer riots for the fun and the thrill of the moment. 147 children were arrested last September after violence broke out across the country in the days and the weeks following the murders of 3 children in Southport. Well, I'm joined in the studio now by the founder of the Sanctuary Foundation, Dr. Krish Kandaya. Dr. Krish, welcome to the studio. On the one hand, there's some very encouraging moments in this report. The Children's Commissioner, Dame Rachel de Souza, says that none of them who were interviewed were driven by racism or misinformation or anything to do with the far right, despite what the Prime Minister said at the time, which many people were very upset by. Tell us what the report did tell us motivated these teens.
So I'm a big fan of Dame Rachel de Souza. She's done a good job listening to children. That's what she's done. She's gone to visit about 20% of those who were prosecuted, and the children that she spoke to seem to have been caught up in the moment of it. Now, that's not to say I think that riots were motivated by racism and an anti-immigration sentiment. We saw that because they set fire to a hotel that was housing asylum seekers. They attacked mosques.
But that wasn't the kids.
It seems that what happened is there's a whole bunch of lawlessness going on and the children kind of lean in and get caught up in that. And I'm sympathetic. I remember when I was a teenager, some of my friends got involved in some pretty unsavoury things. And before you've kind of caught yourself, you're doing something you never thought you would do. And once that's all kicking off around you, I can understand that. It seems that some of the children also had special needs and might be more vulnerable to just going with the flow. So I think that is an important thing to recognise. I spent a lot of time speaking to children who were downtown in places like Liverpool when the riots broke out. Some Year 6 students I interviewed recently, and they were terrified by what they saw. So we need to recognise some real harm was done to our nation's children by these horrible, violent crimes. But it does seem that some of the children were just caught up in the moment.
Okay, I'd just like to paint a different picture, if I could. I have a few pictures to put on the screen now. These are friends, children, who were involved in some of those scenes. Can we get those pictures up now? And I'd like to talk through the reasons that they went along. This was in Aldershot and Rushmore. Let's get those pictures there now. This is a young girl. She's no older than my daughter, about 10. And she's holding up a sign there which says, "Am I far right, Mr. Starmer?" So she was obviously not very happy about that. Can we get to the next picture now? This is a young girl who actually was one of these girls who got the attention of the police, a 13-year-old, and she went along to what became a riot, it wasn't at the time, with that placard, which you can read there, says, "Our women and children are vulnerable too." Politically motivated, concerned about community safety, absolutely nothing to do with being inflammatory, nothing whatsoever to being far right or racist. They were with adults who were concerned about illegal immigrants, asylum seekers, whatever you want to call them, in a hotel in their area, legitimate concerns about community safety, and they were protesting about that. They were swept in, and for their trouble, they were called far right by the government. I'm suggesting to you that's not at all helpful, Dr. Krish.
Well, Martin, look, when those terrible crimes in Southport took place, and last week we had the sentencing, and just listening to those horrible crimes, it's understandable that the community would feel angry, upset. You know, they were horrific crimes. No one should excuse anything that took place there. But what happened with the riots was a rumour spread that it was an illegal asylum seeker that had come here, and that was why we were seeing that violence directed towards an asylum hotel. Now, look, that anger at such an injustice and feeling insecure, that's completely understandable, but it's a different move to say it's an asylum seeker, it's immigrants that are the problem.
Well, no, because
Axel Rudikana was born in Wales.
Yeah, but you see, at that time,
he's not a migrant.
But there was an information void, and there was a huge conversation actually about if that void had been filled with some truth, this may have not been as bad as it was. We can't turn the clock back.
Sure.
What I'm saying is there was a legitimate concern in that community and in many others about the fact they weren't being listened to for a period of many, many, many months before this. This was the incident that made them take to the streets. There was a much greater police presence than it ever had been before. Suddenly, not just kids going along for the thrill of it, but they were legitimately protesting, getting scooped up by the police who went in heavy-handed. There are many different sides to this story, is what I'm trying to say. And I want to make sure that Britain's children aren't portrayed as far-right, poisonous, racist, because they're absolutely not. They care about their communities too.
I think we all need to care about our communities. There is something going wrong in our culture. I'm a foster parent, and as a foster parent, we often care for children who've experienced neglect or sexual abuse. Sadly, across the nation, most children are likely to be abused by someone they know, a family member or a family friend, sports coach, and they tend not to be people from other cultures. They tend not to be immigrants. It tends to be white people. They're the most likely people to do these crimes.
Well, that's because we live in a majority white country, but the fact of the matter is...
to blame the lack of safety of children on immigrants, that's a problem. We all agree
it's
our children need to be kept safe.
It's a legitimate concern in a community. If you feel your community is changing very quickly without you having any power or say, it is a legitimate concern, and that is what drove some of these protests before they turned nasty. That's my point.
It is a legitimate concern to be worried about the safety of our children, but statistically, we shouldn't just be looking at people who are immigrants. That's not appropriate. And when we start to blame them for all the violence, all the sexual abuse, then we've lost the plot, actually. And,
and nobody's doing that. But the government did say that all the violence was far right, and I'm just saying it wasn't. And actually, this report has the exact same conclusion. It wasn't far right at all.
I think some of it was, as the report says, just taking advantage of the moment. We saw people attack a Lush and a Greggs. I don't think that was politically motivated. I think that was just opportunism.
This is about the kids. Anyway, a fruitful conversation. Thank you very much for joining us in the studio. Dr. Krish Kandaya, the founder of the Sanctuary Foundation. Thank you very much. Now, lots more still to come between now and 4 o'clock, including a leaked Home Office report has found that claims of two-tier policing is just the right-wing extremist narrative. Well, I'll be joined by a former minister who says this is madness. That's next. But first, is your headlines with Sam Francis.
Very good afternoon to you. 3:33, the top story this hour. The UK population could hit 72.5 million people by 2032, driven almost entirely by net migration. That's according to new ONS predictions. Statisticians now predict net migration will contribute 340,000 extra people each year from 2028. That is up from 315,000 in earlier estimates. The government, though, says it will present a comprehensive plan to reduce what it calls staggeringly high migration levels, but has ruled out a fixed cap. The driver of a car that crashed into a school tea party, killing 2 8-year-old girls, has been rearrested on suspicion of causing death by dangerous driving. Claire Fremantle was previously told she wouldn't face charges after suffering an epileptic seizure that caused that crash. The Met Police, though, has reopened its investigation following concerns from the families of Nuria Sajjad and Selina Lau. Their parents say it's vital the investigation continues in pursuit of truth and the full facts. An inquest jury has ruled that the helicopter crash which killed 5 people at Leicester City's King Power Stadium in 2018 was an accident. The football club's chairman and pilot were among those who died. Jurors found the aircraft was probably properly maintained and the pilot did take all possible steps to regain control. The coroner said the loss will be felt by families and the Leicester community forever, and she's now considering a report to prevent future accidents. Well, breaking this afternoon, we're just hearing from Cardiff University that they do plan to cut 400 full-time jobs due to a funding shortfall. Nursing, music and modern languages are also among the subjects set to be axed at the university, with closures and mergers also on the table. The University and College Union says it will fight compulsory redundancies, which the university insists will only happen, they say, if absolutely necessary. And also breaking this hour, a Sussex police officer has been charged with raping a teenage girl between the age of 13 and 15 and 3 more sex offences. 23-year-old Thomas Rendell has been suspended from the force where he was a police constable in the East Sussex division. The police watchdog has ordered an investigation and says it will consider misconduct proceedings after criminal proceedings take place. Mr Rendell is set to appear at Guildford Magistrates Court on the 4th of February. Well, those are the latest headlines for now. A full roundup at the top of the hour, and Martin will be straight back with you.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hello there, good afternoon. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. As we head into tonight, showers should largely ease away. Plenty of dry weather as we get into tomorrow, though it is going to be turning rather cloudy and wet across the far south. And the reason for this unsettled spell of weather, well, it's all thanks to low pressure largely dominating the weather, but we do have a ridge of high pressure starting to build in tomorrow. For tonight, though, there are still going to be plenty of showers around to start with, still with a warning in force across southern parts of Wales, but showers should largely ease away. becoming more confined to parts of Scotland, Northern Ireland, perhaps still a fair few showers across parts of Wales too. But a few more clear skies overnight, lighter winds, so that means temperatures are going to dip away. So a slightly chillier night compared to recent nights. To start off tomorrow, once again, there should be plenty of dry weather around. Still plenty of showers feeding into the north, but it's across the south where we need to keep an eye on. Clouds starting to edge into the southwest here. Still a few showers feeding into parts of Wales, western parts of Northern Ireland too, and still plenty of showers, if not longer spells of rain, across parts of Scotland, particularly across the northeast, where they're likely still falling as snow across hills, and still quite blustery down these northeastern coasts of Scotland too. Through the course of the day, not much change. That's away from the far south, however. Still plenty of cloud moving in here. Some outbreaks of rain just starting to edge southern coasts. It's going to be quite a wet and windy day across the Channel Islands. To the north of this, though, plenty of dry weather around. They still can't rule out those showers, particularly around coasts of Northern Ireland and parts of Scotland. Temperatures around about average for the time of year. Slightly milder to the south, though, that being offset by some wet and windy weather just around far southern coasts. That will then edge away eastwards, moving into Sussex and Kent by the evening. Once again, there should be plenty of dry weather as we head into tomorrow night. Still a fair few showers across the north, though. A much nicer day on Thursday, plenty of sunshine around before further rain as we head towards the weekend.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Alan Wright. In Lincolnshire, the M180 is still closed westbound after a collision involving a lorry between Junction 4 at Scorby and Junction 3 for Scunthorpe. In Leicestershire, the A42 northbound is still partly blocked after a collision, and that's between Junction 13 for Colville and 14 for Castle Donington. In Northamptonshire, the A14 is partly blocked eastbound after a collision before Junction 1 for Welford. In Buckinghamshire, the M1 southbound is partly blocked for repairs between Milton Keynes at Junction 14 and 13 for Bedford. And in Hertfordshire, very slow on the clockwise M25 after a collision at Junction 23 for the A1M at South Mims.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Well, good mate, time is 3:39 with me, Martin Daubney, here on GB News. Now, a leaked Home Office report shows that police have been advised to ramp up recording non-crime hate incidents. The review was ordered by the Home Secretary, where claims of two-tier policing are also dismissed. Guess what? As a right-wing extremist narrative. Now, the Prime Minister says his main priority is to keep Brits safe.
When it comes to extremism, it's very important that we are focused on the threat so we can deploy our resource properly, and therefore we're looking carefully at where the key challenges are. Obviously, that's now informed with what I said last week in the aftermath of the Southport murders, where we've got the additional challenge, I think, of a sort of cohort of loners who are extreme, and they need to be factored in. So that's the focus. In the end, what this comes down to is safety and security of people across the United Kingdom, and that's my number one focus.
Well, I'm delighted to say I'm now joined in the studio by the former Defence Minister, Sir Gavin Williamson, who has said the British people have seen two-tier policing happening, and this report is madness. Sir Gavin, a pleasure to have your company. Well, you say it's madness. In which way is it madness?
Well, I think we've all witnessed over the last couple of years where policing hasn't been quite right in this country. And we also have a situation where the government, straight after that awful terrorist incident, was saying that it wasn't terrorism. There was very misleading statements that were coming out of Number 10 and by the police, and people who were actually saying this is a terrorism incident were actually being chased up as a result of that. And it clearly indicates, whether it was the policing of the Gaza demonstrations and the threat that the Jewish community felt, that two-tier policing was happening. And, you know, it seems madness that people are trying to be criminalised by saying that.
But you see, even you saying that is proof that you're far right, according to this report. If you say it's far right, it's due to your policing, it's far right. But another incredible thing in this is that right-wing extremists, whatever they mean, it could be practically any of us, frequently exploit the grooming gang scandal, which should be renamed as alleged group-based sexual abuse. What's the alleged bit of thousands of white working-class girls being raped by mainly Pakistani men?
This is what I find really concerning about the Home Office. Because if they're trying to push this narrative out there, if they're trying to say people can't talk about what is happening, then actually it'll make the British people feel as if they have a lack of confidence in those institutions. And we've got to be open about some of the threats that this country faces. The former head of MI5 was just saying the other day that actually the biggest threats that we face is Islamic terrorism, and we've got to be open about that. We've got to make sure the right proportion of resources are dealing with that, and that's not to say other forms of extremism don't also need to be dealt with, but let's not be blind to the real threats that we're facing.
Do you think that the report recommends we should revive non-crime hate incidents? These aren't real crimes, they're things that might offend people. And apparently the answer to stamping down on civil unrest is just to invent new crimes and tell people off for saying hurty words.
Well, this is such a dangerous route to be going down. Next they'll be saying we have to have blasphemy laws. Next they'll be saying that we need to be cracking down on free speech. This is a very...
Don't give them any ideas.
This is a very slippery slope, and we've got to push back against this, because you've seen the government pander to this. The government needs to reject this outright, which I'm pleased to hear that they've done, but they've got to reject it by their actions as well, not just by saying that this report is wrong.
Can I ask you, do you have concerns about the definition of Islamophobia becoming an issue where actually we're not even allowed to have these kind of conversations? The Labour Party's definition of Islamophobia would say the phrase grooming gangs actually, if itself is Islamophobic. And you're talking about blasphemy laws. Isn't that the way this is all heading if we're not careful?
This is a very dangerous route that potentially you can see this report trying to encourage us to go down. We've got to push back completely on this. We've got to have the right to be able to criticise all faiths. I was criticising the Church of England the other day. We've got to have the freedom to be able to have that debate. We've got to have that freedom to be able to say where things have gone wrong. And this just makes it feel as if there's a squeeze on free speech, and we've got to push back on that.
That's worthwhile pointing out, as you did yourself, Sir Gavin. The Security Minister, Dan Jarvis, has said ministers have rejected this advice. As we've said repeatedly, Islamist extremism followed by far-right extremism are the biggest threats we face. Can I ask you, do you think there's just so much of an obsession now with the far-right that Prevent is taking its eye off the ball, which is actually the provable threat of Islamic terrorism?
Well, the threat that this country is facing is 90% Islamic extremism threat and 10% others. You've got to make sure that the resources are proportionately aligned with that, not perceptions or fashionable sort of North London dinner circuit chat. It's got to be about where the threats are and how that's dealt with. And the Islamic terrorist threat is something that this country has been dealing with and facing for the last 20 years, more than 20 years. And that hasn't changed. Indeed, that threat is increasing, not declining.
So, Gavin Williamson, excellent points. Thank you very much for popping in to see us here at GBNews.
Pleasure.
Come back in the future, please do. It's only just around the corner. Thank you very, very much indeed. Now, are Labour's net zero plans a total and utter fantasy? Well, that's what a former government scientist has said. That's next with me, Martin Daubney, here on GB News, Britain's News Channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Now, we're going to introduce you to Liam Wildish. Liam, well, I'd like to think he's a friend of mine because I follow him on Instagram, on TikTok there as well.
You're a big fan, aren't you?
Big fan, because there's what he does. He's a cleaner. He cleans signs. But the thing is, he's not employed by councils or whatever. He does this voluntarily. And you sort of think to yourself, Well, who cleans these signs? Why have these signs been allowed to get into this terrible state of disrepair and filthiness?
So basically, long story short, about 6 years ago I used to be a window cleaner. In the community where I lived, I noticed all of the road signs were filthy and I was perfectly equipped to clean them. So basically I cleaned the road signs as a bit of a thank you to the community and sort of make a little bit of awareness of my window cleaning business at the time. Sort of cleans up the area, makes the road safer, and that's kind of how that started. And people found it like a really satisfying sort of approach. So that sort of led on to today of a video in cleaning the dirty road signs and making sort of satisfying content with it as well.
What is the equipment? What have we got here?
So this is a water-fed pole system connected to a backpack, which is what feeds the water through the end of the brush there. It's perfectly equipped to basically remove this green dirty, it's like a mildew build-up that you get on the signs. As you can see, this is like extremely effective at removing so.
So GBNews viewers, if they spot a particularly grisly sign in their area, then they can get in touch.
They can do, yeah.
And Liam Wilder's the sign guy can sort you out.
If you find Liam the sign guy online, drop me a message, let me know, and I'll add you to my list of places.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
Because
the failure is...
You're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Dubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's approaching 10 to 4 with me, Martin Daubney, here on GB News. Now then, a former government scientist has written to Ed Miliband, Mr Windmill, branding the UK's net zero plans an engineering fantasy, having underestimated the massive challenges and the costs involved. Well, let's bring in now GB News' science and health editor, Lucy Johnston. Lucy, welcome to the show. Always an absolute pleasure. So not mixing his words here, an absolute fantasy that we can't afford. Tell us the details.
Yes, I mean, he's spent a lot of time studying this and he has approached Ed Miliband and he has approached some of the people at the Department of Energy Security and Net Zero. He hasn't had anyone to refute his figures yet. And what he's saying is that we'll be spending £4.4 trillion by 2050. In my earlier interview, he was a bit lower on his estimates, but he's saying about that, we can play around with the margins, but it's about £4.4 trillion by 2050, which is the equivalent to about £100,000 per household in the UK. And he's also saying that even with the shorter-term aims by the government, by 2030, it's going to cost about 100 billion. So, and that's just to get the grid to adapt to renewable energies. And he's saying not only do we not have the money, we don't have the manpower. We'll need to increase our workforce of skilled labourers, electricians and the like, by about tenfold to about 140,000. We don't have them, we can't train them in time, and nor can we get them from elsewhere. And finally, he's very concerned about the mining that will be involved, that we exploit huge areas of land elsewhere already. We rely on global supply chains, and just to get the lithium and the copper and the other bits that are needed to drive the green energy. So he's saying this is not realistic. And here's my interview with him earlier.
I don't think it's very realistic at all. I think the easiest way to think about it is this last summer or last year, half of all the electricity in this country came from renewable energy, and that is a milestone. But it's taken 20 years for us to reach that. And what they're proposing is to do the second half of the job, that is to get from 50% to 100% renewables, all in 5 years.
Well, if you put the effort in and it's a focus, like Patrick Vallance has said, this needs to be about like a vaccine rollout.
Yeah.
It is something we need to do. We've got forest fires, we have floods.
Yeah.
So surely if you put the effort in, it's
I totally agree that if you put the effort in, but the problem is we need professional engineers. And we have a number of professional engineers in the grid, but if we're going to go 4 times faster, we're going to need 4 times as many professional engineers in the construction of these various pieces, the new power plants and everything else. And these tend to be different kinds of engineers from the ones in the past, particularly for wind or for solar. And we've got a certain number of them, but the idea that their productivity is going to raise by 400% for the next 5 years to get there is, I think, most people would agree, moonshine.
So Professor Kelly he has approached the government with his figures. They haven't refuted them, although the Labour Party, I've approached them too. They haven't come back to me, but Friends of the Earth have said that the cost of not doing this will also cost about £100 billion if we have an increase in temperatures. So there is a dispute about this from all sides, but I think what Professor Kelly's saying is that whether it will cost us to not do this, it's still impossible to do at the moment, and we need to have options, and we need to be more transparent about what we're doing, because people don't know this.
It's astonishing. We were promised 300 quid a year off our bills, and the reality is 100 grand per household for this. Often, reality doesn't meet what we're told by the government. £4.4 trillion. These are numbers we simply cannot get our heads around. Lucy Johnson, another cracking story. Thank you very, very much for joining us today on GB News. Always an absolute delight. Thank you very much. Lucy Johnson there, that's GB News' science and health editor. Isn't it funny how we're just told this is the answer? We'll all be saved by windmills and solar panels. Fret ye not, everything's going to be cheaper. Everything is going to be much more cuddly. Well, how's 100 grand grab it? That's not very cuddly. Neither is 4.4 trillion quid. Anyway, we've got plenty more to come on the show, including the astonishing data which shows a population explosion totally out of control. 10 million immigrants in the next 8 years. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's News Channel. Now it's your weather.
Despite the morning rain, it'll be a nice, warm, cosy day ahead. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, good afternoon. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. As we head into tonight, showers should largely ease away. Plenty of dry weather as we get into tomorrow, though it is going to be turning rather cloudy and wet across the far south. And the reason for this unsettled spell of weather, well, it's all thanks to low pressure largely dominating the weather, but we do have a ridge of high pressure starting to build in tomorrow. For tonight, though, there are still going to be plenty of showers around to start with, still with a warning in force across southern parts of Wales, but showers should largely ease away, becoming more confined to parts of Scotland, Northern Ireland, perhaps still a fair few showers across parts of Wales too, but a few more clear skies overnight, lighter winds, so that means temperatures are going to dip away, so a slightly chillier night compared to recent nights. To start off tomorrow, once again, there should be plenty of dry weather around, still plenty of showers feeding into the north, but it's across the south where we need to keep an eye on. Clouds starting to edge into the southwest here, still a few showers feeding into parts of Wales, western parts of Northern Ireland too, and still plenty of showers, if not longer spells of rain across parts of Scotland, particularly across the northeast, where they're likely still falling as snow across hills, and still quite blustery down these northeastern coasts of Scotland too. Through the course of the day, not much change. That's away from the far south, however. Still plenty of cloud moving in here. Some outbreaks of rain just starting to edge southern coasts. It's going to be quite a wet and windy day across the Channel Islands. To the north of this, though, plenty of dry weather around. They still can't rule out those showers, particularly around coasts of Northern Ireland and parts of Scotland. Temperatures around about average for the time of year. Slightly milder to the south, though, that being offset by some wet and windy weather just around far southern coasts. That will then edge away eastwards, moving into Sussex and Kent by the evening. Once again, there should be plenty of dry weather as we head into tomorrow night. Still a fair few showers across the north, though. A much nicer day on Thursday, plenty of sunshine around before further rain as we head towards the weekend.
There will be a light breeze in the morning, leading to a warm front. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Alan Wright. In Lancashire, the M6 northbound is partly blocked by a broken down lorry. It's between junction 33 for Lancaster South and 34 for Lancaster and the A683. In Lincolnshire, the M180 is shut westbound after a collision involving a lorry. That's closed from junction 4 at Scorby along to junction 3 for Scunthorpe. In Northamptonshire, the A14 eastbound is partly blocked for bridge repairs. They're taking place near junction 12 for Islip. And in Buckinghamshire, the M1 southbound, there's a lane shut there for emergency repairs, and they're between junction 14 for Milton Keynes and junction 13 for Bedford and the A421.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
This is the final week to grab your chance to win our biggest cash prize so far, £50,000 in tax-free cash. How would you react if you won?
We won 25,000. I'd say don't hesitate, do it. If you're not in it, you've got no chance of winning it.
Don't miss out as lines close on Friday. For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. You can call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB10 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 31st of January. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more.
Whether it's breaking royal news,
Will, please bring us up to date.
or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons,
Very, very curious.
we bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
A very, very good afternoon to you. It's 4 p.m. and welcome to the Martin Daubney Show here on GB News. We're broadcasting for you live from the heart of Westminster and all across the UK. On today's show, astonishing new data released today predicts that the UK will be flooded with almost 10 million additional immigrants in the next 8 years, swelling our population to an astonishing 72.5 million. Later on in today's show, I'll be joined by the heavy hitter Ben Habib to ask him, is it time to declare a state of immigration emergency? And a shock new report by the Children's Commissioner has found that precisely none of the under-18s arrested in last summer's riots were spurred on by misinformation, racism or other right-wing influences. So they weren't right-wing at all. So why did Sir Keir Starmer and the entire government and the establishment media all make this baseless claim? Talking of which, a leaked Home Office report claims that right-wing extremists frequently exploit the grooming gang scandal, which they think should be renamed as alleged group-based sexual abuse. Because, you've guessed it, right-wingers want to promote anti-Muslim sentiment. I'll be joined by a police and crime commissioner to ask her, is the Home Office completely losing the plot? And another huge story, huge in fact. Should the United Kingdom follow Donald Trump's lead and leave the World Health Organization? One of the country's leading oncologists, the peerless Dr. Carol Sikora, a former director of the WHO cancer programme, he sensationally claims it stinks, it is not serving Britain well, and we should leave. Now that is an action-packed show. What's the show? Always an absolute pleasure to have your company. So 10 million immigrants will be coming in, 10 million going in, 5 million going out, net 5 million in. 5 years ago on Friday, we voted to take back control of our borders. We finally left the European Union. I pressed the button myself in Brussels. We were promised this would stop. It hasn't stopped. They've completely and utterly lost control. In fact, I go further. They've completely and utterly lost the plot. Do you have faith in any of them to ever take back control of our borders? I certainly don't. But anyway, that's the question today. Can we ever stop this tide? Get in touch, gbnews.com/you'll say. But now's your headlines, and it's Sam Francis.
Very good afternoon to you. Just after 4 o'clock, the top story. Well, the UK population could hit 72.5 million people by 2032, driven almost entirely by net migration. According to the Office for National Statistics, net migration will contribute 340,000 extra people each year from 2028. That's up from 315,000 in earlier estimates. The government says it will present a comprehensive plan to reduce what it calls the staggeringly high migration levels, but has ruled out a fixed cap. Well, the Shadow Home Secretary Chris Philps says the projected 10 million arrivals over the next decade is unacceptable and must be stopped.
Forecasts the ONS put out are completely unacceptable. They don't need to happen and they should not happen. What Kemi Badenoch and I have said is there should be a legally binding annual cap on the number of visas that we issue to get these numbers right down. You know, we have 9 million working age people here in the UK that are not in the workforce. We need to see those people getting to work, and we need to see more investment in technology and mechanisation instead of importing very large numbers of low-skill wages. That is not the right thing to do. We need to see change, and we've got a plan to do that.
The driver of a car that crashed into a school tea party, killing 2 8-year-old girls, has been re-arrested on suspicion of causing death by dangerous driving. Claire Fremantle was previously told she wouldn't face charges after suffering an epileptic seizure. The Met Police, though, has reopened its investigation following concerns from the families of Nuria Sajjad and Selina Lau. Their parents say it's vital the investigation continues in pursuit of truth and the full facts. An inquest jury has ruled the deaths of 5 people in the 2018 helicopter crash outside Leicester's King Power Stadium were accidental. The football club's chairman, the pilot and 3 passengers were all killed when the helicopter spiralled out of control after taking off from the pitch. Jurors, though, found the aircraft was properly maintained and the pilot did take all possible steps to regain control. The coroner has said she's now considering a report to prevent future accidents. Cardiff University plans to cut 400 full-time jobs due to a funding shortfall. Nursing, music and modern languages are among the subjects set to also be axed with the school closures and mergers on the table. The University and College Union says it will fight compulsory redundancies, which the university insists will only happen if absolutely necessary. The UK has pledged an extra £17 million in humanitarian aid to Gaza, with a focus on food, water and healthcare. The Development Minister made that announcement in the House of Commons earlier, confirming £2 million will also go towards restoring vital infrastructure. Well, as the fragile ceasefire in Gaza now enters its second week, thousands of civilians are returning to the north of the territory. And Annalise Dodds has warned that Israel's ban on UN aid risks stalling the progress being made and is calling for unrestricted access for humanitarian agencies. And a leaked Home Office report is calling for police to record more non-crime hate incidents despite previous orders to stop over free speech concerns. It dismisses claims of two-tier policing as right-wing extremist narrative. The review ordered by the Home Secretary also describes grooming gangs as an alleged problem frequently exploited by the far right. Well, the Shadow Business Secretary Andrew Griffith told us that the report's conclusion is disturbing.
The Home Secretary needs to publish this immediately so that we can all see for ourselves what and who it is that's saying these non-crime hate incidents, these attack and waste of police resources, something a Conservative Home Secretary stopped. And there's clearly a cell within the Home Office that is not concerned about ordinary crime, ordinary policing, in favour of this ideological approach to non-crime hate incidents. They're wrong. That's not where we should be putting our police resources. And the Home Secretary needs to come to Parliament today, publish this report and explain who it is that keeps coming up with this idea.
Well, the Prime Minister has also responded to that report, saying that extremism is important to focus resources on the threats that are faced by the UK.
I think when it comes to extremism, it's very important that we are focused on the threat so we can deploy our resource properly, and therefore we're looking carefully at where the key challenges are. Obviously, that's now informed with what I said last week in the aftermath of the Southport murders, where we've got the additional challenge, I think, of a sort of cohort of loners who are extreme. And they need to be factored in. So that's the focus. In the end, what this comes down to is safety and security of people across the United Kingdom, and that's my number one focus.
That's the news on GB News. I'll be back with you in half an hour. Now, though, it's over to Martin.
Thank you, Sam. We've got loads to go at, so let's get cracking. Now, the UK's population is set to rise to an astonishing 72.5 million by mid-2032. And the projection released by the Office for National Statistics, as you can see on your screen, look at that, it's like an Elon Musk rocket taking off. It's driven almost entirely, in fact, it is entirely, by net migration, with an astonishing 5 million increase over the next 8 to 10 years. Well, let's bring in now GB News' political editor, Chris Hope. Chris, these are simply astonishing figures. As I said before, 5 years ago this Friday, we finally voted to leave the European Union. We were promised by the establishment, we were promised we would take back control of our borders. This is the precise opposite. It's completely and utterly out of control.
4.9 million increasing between 2022 and 2032. New population estimate, a projection, 72.5 million people by mid-2032. A major challenge for this government. 1.75 million arriving here in this parliament before the election. This government wants to build 1.5 million homes. They're short even on their homes building target against those net arrivals. Again, a net figure, twice as many arriving as, more arriving than leaving. So that's a net figure. Now, I've got an update for you right now from Catherine Forster, who's been in the lobby briefing with the PM's spokespeople. They say the PM's been clear that not putting a cap on numbers because they're committed to bringing down the last government's record high immigration. They want to boost our own workforce here, reduce our reliance on overseas workers, etc. And they make the point, which is worth making. The ONS projections are based on current government policy.
Right, so change policy.
Martin, if the government does things in the future which will mitigate this, maybe play with the visa rules, maybe stop families coming in with some workers, all that kind of thing, that can bring numbers down. So what we have here is almost a snapshot. If government policy didn't change between now going forward, that's the number you get to. So it is possible to bring these numbers down, but we're going nowhere near what Leanne's been telling you in the past hour of a net zero target.
Even a net zero target would be 5 million in. You know, still 5 million.
And 5 million out.
Just
and
to
5 million out. That's why it's called net zero.
Just to stand still. But this is 10 million in. It's 2 for 1. 2 in, 1 out. 10 million people, and ostensibly we know the type of immigration now tends to be typically non-EU countries. So culturally, 10 million people further from our cultural norms. It's changing the fabric of Britain. The Labour Party, have they got their head around this? I mean, you kept saying that they said, oh yeah, it's staggeringly hard. We're all staggering. We're staggered. We're fed up with it. Have they got any clue that they've got to do something about it? They can't keep saying, oh, we can't commit to a cap. They've got to do something, or surely they're going to be toast.
They did say about maybe 6 to a dozen times in a briefing this morning, these figures are staggeringly high. They are trying to make clear they understand the pressure here. What the government won't do is put a cap on it. There's little, though, respite from the Tories. The Tories are saying this can and must be stopped from materialising. They say they want a hard legal cap on visas. The problem with the Tory party, you're shaking your head, Martin, probably rightly so, they failed for 14 years to get this right. The beneficiary politically is probably Nigel Farage. Now, he's been saying on social media that our quality of life as a country is declining due to this population explosion, as he calls it. It's the biggest issue facing our country. Now, I'm off shortly from here to go and interview him for his show tonight, Farage 7 till 8. So tune into that channel and see what Farage has to say. His idea is 1 in, 1 out. Critics say that doesn't make any allowance for some areas where we have shortages, like in social care and the NHS.
I think you should ask him. 1 in, 1 out still means 5 million coming in. I think a lot of people will be quite staggered that that's the case. But on a serious point, they can't keep saying, oh, we can't put a cap on it, we can't give any detail. They need to act pretty sharpish. And I think it's not just the Labour Party. As you said, the Tories have 14 years to sort this out. There's a feeling now that all of them promise the world, and when they're in power, they simply never deliver.
Well, to prepare the government, they've been in charge for 6 months. They are saying we're going to bring it down, not putting a figure on it. Now, the weakness of that, I think, is I know Whitehall, having covered this area of our politics and policy for 20 years, officials respond to a hard target. If they go out at the top, the minister's saying, that's the number, everything else must follow that. They respond to a hard target. The problem is we had hard targets on the Tory party through 4 elections, and on each time they failed.
Well, David Cameron said tens of thousands. Now it's at 10 million. Chris Hope, thank you very, very much. And let's continue this conversation now. I'm joined by the Research Director at the Centre for Policy Studies, and that's Carl Williams. Carl, welcome to the show. It just feels like we're at Groundhog Day. Every government promises to do something about it. Nothing changes. In fact, it gets worse and worse and worse. And people are entitled to say things like, we're hearing the government say, oh, we're going to build 1.5 million new homes. Well, that's gone at the drop of a hat. That's gone in 1 year with these figures. It's simply unsustainable.
Yes, absolutely. And I just wanted to pick up on something you were saying with Chris just now. The levels of churn here are a major factor. On the current projections, by 2031, so the next census date, about 1 in 5 people in the country will have been born overseas.
And that's exactly right. And it's not just about the numbers, Carl Williams, but the changing tide, the changing pattern. Ostensibly now we see less immigrants coming in from the European Union. We see more coming from non-EU. So when you look at immigration on this kind of scale, this kind of pace, these kind of numbers, it's a wholesale change of the cultural fabric of Britain.
Yes, completely. And I think there's also the misconception that most of the people coming here are coming to work. But only 17% of the visas that were given out over the last 4 years actually went to workers on work routes. For every worker on a skilled worker visa brought 1.3 dependents on average, and then had all the other routes adding to the pressures. So you have the change to the cultural fabric, you have the pressure on housing, on public services, on infrastructure, at a pace we've just never seen before.
OK, Carl, I'm joined by our political editor, Chris Hope. He's got a question for you.
Carl, your job is to think big thoughts, advise ministers and Tory politicians possibly also about how to tackle the toughest challenges facing our country. How would you bring down net migration to fewer than 100,000 a year?
Well, I think the key thing to remember here is there was one success in immigration policy in the last 14 years, and that was under David Cameron and Theresa May in 2010 to 15. They put a hard cap on non-EU net migration because, of course, we couldn't control EU numbers. Non-EU numbers came down. The problem is that after Brexit, we then lifted the cap on all routes and just relied on thresholds. We know the caps work. I think you have to think about putting a cap on visas again.
Carl, isn't the problem, though, is that the Labour Party, let's not forget, Sir Keir Starmer campaigned for 3 years against Brexit. When he was in opposition, certainly in the Brexit years, he was a huge fan of open borders. It was part of the European dream. Do you think people are going to accept suddenly the notion that Sir Keir Starmer is going to crack down like Nigel Farage on immigration, or is it just simply more hot air?
I think he understands the political imperatives, the way he's going to have to try and do something on this, but I don't think his heart's in it, and I don't think the heart of most of the Labour Party are in it. I think there is an ideological commitment to open borders, as you say, even though actually it's many of their core voters who are pressured most by this. It's in particular the young people trying to get on the housing ladder, having to deal with high rents. These are sort of at the front line of the immigration crisis. These are notionally Labour's core voters. And I think as more and more people realise what's adding to these pressures, it's going to become more and more difficult for Labour, and maybe they will be forced to do something.
OK, Chris Up.
Well, very, very quick on that, Carl. You say you don't believe they are committed. They do tell us repeatedly these figures are staggeringly high, and they are planning a white paper shortly. They are looking at measures, maybe, as you say, might be a cap, might not be a cap, but certainly tightening up on visa rules, I'd imagine. Is that not enough? Do you think there's an issue that the party itself doesn't really believe in controlling migration figures?
There's that, and I also worry that they're not prepared to make some of the trade-offs they'd need to get numbers down. So we have a system where there's quite a lot of lower-tier universities now propped up by the international student numbers. I think they're going to be wary of taking on that. They're going to worry about doing things on work routes because I think the growth situation is very precarious. They'll be afraid of driving away high-skilled workers. They have to fix the NHS, therefore they're worried about the health and care visa. I think the last few years have shown us migration isn't the way to fix these things, by the way. But I think Labour is still wedded to some of these ideas, and therefore will try and shy away from the difficult decisions. And to add to that, they'll probably try and focus more on cracking down on illegal migration, as the Blair government did back in the early 2000s, and hope that people don't talk about legal migration too much. I don't think that'll wash anymore. I think people are very aware of what the numbers are, but that's the way I think it'll probably go.
I think you're absolutely right. Illegal immigration, of course, is a huge problem. But compared to legal migration, it's tiny in comparison. Carl Williams, thank you very much. That's the Research Director at the Centre for Policy Studies. Now, earlier on in the show, in an epic ding-dong with Lee Anderson, the political commentator Matthew Stadlen told me that Labour have to get migration right if they want to be in power come the next general election.
Government needs to get tougher on illegal immigration, right? I'm not blaming the individuals themselves. They, as Lee accepts, want to come here, at least in part, for a better life themselves. But you have to have a rules-based system. Okay. And the politics of this is, if Labour doesn't get a grip on legal migration and illegal migration quite quickly in the next few years, never mind what the Tories did in the past, I think they will lose the next election because a lot of people care about it. And by the way, although a lot of racists are out there and do use these sorts of stories to further their racist agenda and hide behind them, there are a lot of people who are not racist but who think the pace of change is too quickly, is going too quickly. They can't get the services that they want.
Well, we had a massive ding-dong there with Matthew Stadlen and Lee Anderson, and at 5 o'clock I'll be joined by Ben Habib, so don't miss that. Now, time is running out on your chance to become our biggest ever giveaway winner with an incredible 50 grand in your bank account, and of course that's totally tax-free cash to spend however the dickens you like. Now, make sure you don't miss out.
There's just 3 days left to grab your chance to win our biggest cash prize so far, £50,000 in tax-free cash. How would you react if you won?
It's such a nice feeling. Just go for it. It's one text, and if I can win, anyone can win.
I was on cloud nine. I'd say don't hesitate, do it.
For another chance to win £50,000 cash, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. You can call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB10 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrants must be 18 or over. Don't miss out as lines close on Friday. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Good luck. I've got another epic conversation coming up. Should the UK follow Donald Trump's lead and leave the World Health Organization? Well, a former director of the World Health Organization Cancer Programme thinks so. That's next. He thinks it stinks. It's Dr. Carol Sikora next with me, Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's News Channel.
Headliners on GB News 11 p.m. every night. It's got 3 top comedians going through the next day's newspapers so you don't have to read them, which is great.
That's a good point.
He's lying. I mean, maybe he's not lying.
That's Headliners every night from 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. as well on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Lauren, let's start with this, shall we? How children's TV may be harming, not helping young minds.
Yeah, so this is an article in the Express today, a big double-page spread as a result of some new research in a new book that's coming out by a child psychologist, saying that children's television, and I think perhaps more importantly, the way that children consume television and video product now is perhaps not as healthy for them as we would hope it would be. And there's quite some distance from children's television of the past, of the sort of the Bagpuss and Clangers and Ivor the Engine era. And I think what's interesting about this is particularly the how children's television is consumed angle, because children are now put in front of screens significantly more often than they were, certainly when I think we were growing up. The content that they are consuming is not great for their brains and their learning and development, which Floella Benjamin of children's television fame is now leading a big crusade to say that some of this is really, really bad for children.
These days, they're not watching the TV that we all watched when we were growing up. They're not even watching GB News in the morning.
What are they thinking?
Would you believe it? But they are watching this absolute drivel all day long on YouTube, and because obviously all our TVs are now connected to the internet, or they're getting TikTok on their TV. It's not even, so they don't even necessarily have to have smartphones or iPads. They can just watch this stuff on TV, and it is rubbish. They are watching it and they're obsessed with it. Oh God, Skibbity Toilet or something. Have you heard of this?
No.
No? Well, you'll have viewers who have got who are parents of sort of 13-year-olds, and this Skibbity Toilet thing is, they're all obsessed with it, and this is a really annoying sort of theme tune or thing that they sing at you.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
Welcome back. Your time is 4:24. You're with me, Martin Daubney, here on GB News. Now, Donald Trump has signed a number of executive orders thus far, and one of them is ordering the US to leave the World Health Organization. So, here's a question for you. Should the UK follow Donald Trump's lead and leave the World Health Organization? It's a huge question. Let's bring in an expert now, and that is one of the country's leading oncologists, Dr. Carol Sikora, a former director of the WHO Cancer Programme, and you've put a tweet out here on that, Dr. Sikora, saying it stinks. It's time for us to leave. Tell us why.
I think it's a massive bureaucracy. It consumes $7 billion each year. It employs a large number of bureaucrats. It's lost its way with technological medicine. Even in the pandemic, it let us down. The director's not even medically qualified. And it changed its mind halfway through. No evidence base, just political swaying and throwing. You know, if you're an immigration controller at Heathrow, you want clear instructions about how to let or not let people in. You can obey instructions. You can't have wishy-washy statements saying one day no border control for infection, the next day stop all border transits. That's the problem. The other thing, Martin, it hasn't moved to the modern era. Even in poor countries, because people are living longer, which is a good thing, cancer, heart disease, diabetes, obesity are there. And it's not really got any expertise in that. It's good for infection up to a point. What Trump's doing, I'm sure, is a poker game. By saying I'm withholding funds, he's going to get them to reform, and it'll emerge much stronger at the end.
And Dr. Sakura, I remember very well during COVID lockdowns, you were speaking out about the fact, and it was abundantly true, that the WHO was politically compromised. It was 1 minute playing pro-China, the next being pushing back against China. It felt like it was doing China's bidding in the very, very early days. Many people at that point completely lost faith. Can you give us an idea about how much this costs us? And are they pushing an agenda globally which pushes vaccines forward and is seen as, if you like, anti-Western?
It was amazing how they handled the laboratory leak project. Most of us agree. If you read the literature, unbiased scientific observation, it looks like an unintentional laboratory leak from Wuhan, from the Institute of Virology. It was sort of covered up. They had a high-powered investigation team that were told what to write. I've seen this many times in university politics, and you get it there. I mean, the real problem for the WHO is people won't pay to have poor people treated with cancer and heart disease. They'll pay to keep infection out of their countries, and that's how it originated. But it's not doing either of those jobs well. Something has to change, and I think that's what Trump is signaling. It'll be interesting to see what the Chinese do. They're the second biggest contributor after the US. It'll be interesting to see. We're a quite major contributor, $230 million a year from NHS. Our NHS money is going to them. Germany only pay $30 million. So it's you know, we could say, why are we paying so much? What are we getting that's so much better than Germany?
And you think it's a fair question to ask people like Donald Trump saying, well, we're paying millions and millions of dollars. The WHO has been pretty critical of Donald Trump as an individual, and a bit like on other areas of his policy, it's like America comes first. If Donald Trump wants to spend millions of dollars on healthcare, isn't that better spent domestically? And if that happens, is this really the end of the road for the WHO? If their big funders pull out, is the writing on the wall for them?
I think that's completely true. And the problem, like all public sector bureaucracies, they run a machine. It was interesting, that photograph of the building at Geneva had an office on the 5th floor overlooking the lake. And, you know, when you were there, which was about a fifth of the time, it was just shoveling papers, documents, translated into 6 languages, and the audience were other bureaucrats. It was just unbelievable. It was a wonderful job to go to poorer countries and see how they were interpreting the cancer problem with limited resources. But I'm afraid they didn't really need the WHO organization behind them. It's got a brand beyond its reputation, in fact. The brand is very good, but it's not doing its job properly. Something needs to change, and Trump is trying to lead that, I'm sure.
And there have been a lot of cases, for example, where the WHO, after COVID, seem to get a taste for telling us how to live our lives. They're very kind of against alcohol, red meat. They have this agenda of trying to make us all like Jeremy Corbyn's, you know, joyless vegans. It's not really their job, is it, to tell us how to live our lives? There's healthy advice, and they're simply poking their noses in.
I think, you know, to do something in terms of public health, you have to have resources and skill, and interpret it in the culture of the country you're trying to do it in. And I'm afraid the WHO doesn't have that. It's a self-serving bureaucracy. Often when you go to poorer countries, you find that local staff seem to be related to the Minister of Health there. And yet they're getting nice Geneva salaries. It's frightening to see. So I think only reform can save it. You know, when I was there, the Prime Minister of Norway really tried very hard. She became the director, and she was really good trying to reform, but she left after 3 years because she felt it unreformable. The only way is the purse strings. You hold the purse strings like Donald Trump, you can reform the organization, just like with the NHS. If you control the purse string, you can change it.
Well, Dr. Carol Sakura, a voice of common sense as ever. It's an absolute pleasure to talk to you. It's been way, way too long. Channeling your inner Donald Trump there. Time to pull the plug on the WHO. Thank you very much, Dr. Carol Sakura, for joining us on GB News. Wow, superb. Now, there's lots more still to come between now and 5 o'clock, including astonishing new research sheds light on what may be driving some of Labour's most controversial policy decisions, like rejecting a national inquiry into those rape gang crises. I've done some deep diving on the data of the Muslim vote across Britain. And what it means for the Labour Party, it's astonishing. You'll not want to miss that. But first, here's your headlines with Sam Francis.
Very good afternoon to you. It's just after 4:30. The UK population is set to soar to 72.5 million people by 2032, with net migration driving that increase. New figures from the ONS reveal 340,000 people will be added each year from 2028. That's up from earlier estimates of 315,000. The government has promised a comprehensive plan to tackle what it calls staggeringly high migration levels, but it has ruled out introducing a fixed cap on numbers. The driver of a car that crashed into a school tea party, killing 2 8-year-old girls, has been re-arrested on suspicion of causing death by dangerous driving. Claire Fremantle was previously told she wouldn't face charges after suffering an epileptic seizure that caused that crash in Wimbledon. The Met Police has reopened its investigation following concerns from the families of Nuria Sajjad and Selina Lau. Their parents say it's vital the investigation continues in pursuit of truth and the full facts. Cardiff University has announced plans to cut 400 full-time jobs due to a funding shortfall. Nursing, music and modern languages are among the subjects to be axed, with school closures and mergers also on the table. The University and College Union says it will fight compulsory redundancies, which the university insists will only happen if absolutely necessary. The UK has pledged an extra £17 million in humanitarian aid in Gaza, with a focus on food, water, healthcare and sanitation. The Development Minister made that announcement earlier today, confirming £2 million will also go toward restoring vital infrastructure. Well, as the fragile ceasefire in Gaza enters its second week, thousands of civilians are returning to the north of the territory. Annalise Dodds warned that Israel's ban on UN aid risks stalling the progress that's been made and is calling for unrestricted access for humanitarian agencies. And take a look at this. Boom Supersonic has just set the skies in a historic test flight over the Mojave Desert, setting the stage for the possible return of supersonic travel. The flight could redefine air travel, pushing the boundaries of speed and marking a significant step towards once again breaking the sound barrier. The so-called XB-1 is expected to create a sonic boom potentially heard 30 miles away. The milestone comes after 11 successful test flights, including one earlier this month, where the jet managed to reach 728 miles an hour. Well, if all goes planned today, a new 64-seat supersonic jet known as Overture will soon take to the skies as well, marking the first of its kind since the Concorde. Those are the latest headlines for now. I'll be back with you in half an hour. Now it's over to Martin.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hello there, good afternoon. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. As we head into tonight, showers should largely ease away. Plenty of dry weather as we get into tomorrow, though it is going to be turning rather cloudy and wet across the far south. And the reason for this unsettled spell of weather, well, it's all thanks to low pressure largely dominating the weather, but we do have a ridge of high pressure starting to build in tomorrow. For tonight, though, there are still going to be plenty of showers around to start with, still with a warning in force across southern parts of Wales, but showers should largely ease away, becoming more confined to parts of Scotland, Northern Ireland, perhaps still a fair few showers across parts of Wales too, but a few more clear skies overnight, lighter winds, so that means temperatures are going to dip away, so a slightly chillier night compared to recent nights. To start off tomorrow, once again, there should be plenty of dry weather around, still plenty of showers feeding into the north, but it's across the south where we need to keep an eye on. Clouds starting to edge into the southwest here, still a few showers feeding into parts of Wales, western parts of Northern Ireland too, and still plenty of showers, if not longer spells of rain across parts of Scotland, particularly across the northeast, where they're likely still falling as snow across hills, and still quite blustery down these northeastern coasts of Scotland too. Through the course of the day, not much change. That's away from the far south, however. Still plenty of cloud moving in here. Some outbreaks of rain just starting to edge southern coasts. It's going to be quite a wet and windy day across the Channel Islands. To the north of this, though, plenty of dry weather around. They still can't rule out those showers, particularly around coasts of Northern Ireland and parts of Scotland. Temperatures around about average for the time of year. Slightly milder to the south, though, that being offset by some wet and windy weather just around far southern coasts. That will then edge away eastwards, moving into Sussex and Kent by the evening. Once again, there should be plenty of dry weather as we head into tomorrow night. Still a fair few showers across the north, though. A much nicer day on Thursday, plenty of sunshine around before further rain as we head towards the weekend.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Alan Wright. In South Yorkshire, the M18 southbound is partly blocked after a collision at junction 6 for Thorn and the A614. In Lancashire, the M6 northbound is partly blocked by a broken down lorry between junction 33 for the A6 and 34 for Lancaster and the A683. In Warwickshire, there are 2 lanes shut on the M6 northbound after a collision between junction 3 for Coventry and junction 3A for the M6 toll. And in Buckinghamshire, the M1 southbound, that's still partly blocked for emergency repairs. They're taking place between junction 14 for Milton Keynes and 13 for Bedford and the A421.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Welcome back. Time is 4:37 with me, Martin Daubney, here on GB News. Now, astonishing new research sheds light on what may be driving some of Labour's most controversial decisions, including rejecting a national inquiry into the rape gang crisis. Now, this was analysis carried out by myself and the Centre for Migration Control, and it found there are 89 seats in the United Kingdom where the Muslim population is twice the national average of 6%. Now, in those 89 seats, 82% of them cover areas affected by the rape gang scandal of children, according to GB News' list of impacted towns and cities. Now, astonishingly, Labour holds 80 of those seats. 80 of 89, that's 90% of the seats in Britain with the highest proportion of Muslim voters are controlled by the Labour Party. And here's where it gets really interesting. These seats include big hitters, including the Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, the Safeguarding Minister, Jess Phillips, the Foreign Secretary, David Lammy, and the Justice Secretary, Shabana Mahmood. So the big question is the propensity of Muslim voters in seats making the Labour Party bury their heads in the sands about certain topics and pandering to their voter base? Well, we can now speak with the Iranian civil rights activist Lily Moo. Lily, it's always an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. A delight to see you once again. Is it a conspiracy theory to say that the Labour Party, they have a higher proportion of Muslim voters? Some people are saying that means they're playing for those votes. Or is that a conspiracy theory?
Thank you for having me again, Martin. And before I start, I first and foremost want to say a big welcome to Emily Damari, the British hostage who has been released from Hamas captivity 2 weeks ago, and Naama Levy, whose horrific scene of her capture was seen on the vans by the terrorists and the bloody pants. And she is just like all the other British girls who have been taken into captivities and have been raped in unbelievable manners, are a testament to bravery and actually resilience. And I welcome all the hostages back, and I also want to welcome the Labour Party for, in the same manner that they have so promptly, in such a great way, they've asked for a public inquiry for the murders of the 3 innocent British girls in Southport. They are also capable of looking for a national inquiry into the gangs who have so devastatingly damaged and murdered and raped British girls. We cannot sacrifice the girls of Britain just to keep face. And also another thing I want to say is that the Labour Party has a duty of care towards its British Muslim constituents. Why should, in so many of the areas affected by these brutal gangs, why should the Pakistani families not know who is the perpetrator and who is the evil member of the community and who to keep away from? There are mothers who are going into bed with their husbands who are actively taking part in these gangs in raping the daughters of Britain. We as a community, as a country, have a duty towards one another. And the Labour Party has a duty to this country. As the leading party of the country right now, in a democratic country, they have a duty of care, and they have to bring a national inquiry. And if the Labour Party is so afraid of having its Muslim constituents turning against them, they are very much mistaken. The Muslim constituents in this country are also active members of this country, and they want safety and they want justice for their community just as much as all of the victims of this rapes and unbelievable acts of torture that have taken place.
You know, Lily, I think you're exactly right. You know, the vast majority of law-abiding Muslims, you know, don't deserve to be tarred with the same brush as the vile rapists, of course, and that's what Wes Streeting said himself. But I do wonder, when you look at seats like Mr Streeting's, which had a majority of only about 500 odd votes, he almost lost to a pro-Gaza independent. The same with Jess Phillips, the safeguarding minister, who in many people's eyes, she turned down that opportunity to have a full national inquiry into the rape gangs. Is there any merit in the idea that by going for an inquiry of this nature, it may upset Muslim voters, and the Labour Party, even ministers, could lose their seats over it?
I believe anybody who is in the government or in any public office that is responsible for hiding this atrocity that has taken place against this country and the girls of this country should lose office. And if Labour is too afraid of having its possible members who are criminals, if they are criminals, they have to come to justice. There has to be accountability. They are there for a reason. Ministers and public office holders are there, members of parliament are there to protect and lead this country. They are not supposed to be protected by the laws and position in order to hide or carry out atrocities against this country. This is a country of law.
Okay, Lily, I just want to get some of the constituencies on screen now, if I could, just to have a look at them. Let's get a list of these are the constituencies in Britain. It's a bit hard to read on the screen there. Let me talk you through them. The percentage of Muslim voters, the top seat, Bradford West, 58% of the voters there are Muslims. That's the seat of Naz Shah. Second, Birmingham Hall Green and Moseley. That's 54%. That's Taha Ali. Shabana Mahmood, the Justice Secretary, Birmingham Ladywood, 48% of the voters there are Muslim. And in fact, if you go down to the 80 top seats in Britain, they are all controlled either by the Labour Party or a pro-Gaza independent. At 46, actually, is Leicester East. That's the Conservative, but that has the highest number of Hindus in the country. There are a lot of people dependent on a lot of Muslim votes to stay in power in Britain. And I think the whole point of this conversation, Lily Moo, is are people keeping quiet about culturally sensitive things so as not to rock the apple cart, so as to stay in power? And if that's the case, we've got a bit of a problem. We have to leave it there. We've run out of time. It's always a pleasure to have you on the show. Lily Moo, thank you for joining us from Berlin, and thank you for your touching words about those hostages who've been released. Now, I must point out, we have approached the Labour Party for a comment on this story, but so far today we have had no response. However, Sir Keir Starmer has previously acknowledged that there is an issue of ethnicity that has to be understood and addressed in the context of the grooming gang scandal. And he has pointed out to his own record, saying that he brought the first major prosecution of an Asian grooming gang. And the Labour Party would also say that they have a mandate to represent all of British society, and their plan for change says that they are setting milestones to reflect the priorities of working people. Now, coming next, five former Defence Secretaries turned fire on Labour last night over their reckless plans to delay a vital military spending boost. The legendary Lord Dannatt joins me next. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's News Channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
Well, specialist from Woolly and Wallace Auction House, Alexandra Aguilar, joins me now. Alexandra, how lovely to see you. And I wonder whether you were going to bring the jewellery in. You're actually wearing the jewellery. So shall we begin with the bracelet?
Right, so it's a diamond line bracelet, as you can see. It's really a beautiful thing. It's made of 27 diamonds with a yellow tint, and they are mounted on yellow gold, and it's really a beautiful, beautiful piece. But there's more to it, and as you mentioned, it's the provenance. It comes from the collection of Elizabeth Taylor, really one of the queens of Hollywood, and it was given to her by Michael Jackson.
Have you any idea why Michael Jackson gave her such a magnificent gift?
They were very, very good friends. They were friends for over 20 years, and he knew her love for diamonds, for jewelry, and we know that they exchanged many presents, including this fantastic bracelet.
Would that have been made new at that time?
Yes, I believe so.
We're talking, what, about the 1970s or something like that?
Oh, maybe a little bit later.
Later, 80s?
Yes, that's right. But what's particularly interesting about this one is all the 27 diamonds have the same colour. And it's very difficult to find stones with the same colour, with the same yellow tint. So it makes it particularly beautiful and particularly special.
Why do you think it will go for about £70,000?
It's... well, it is a beautiful piece. It's very wearable, as you can see, and there is the provenance is amazing. Jewelry from the collection of Elizabeth Taylor is very sought after, of course.
GB News, the People's Channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
I'm Stephen Dixon, and thanks for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Your time is 4:49 with me, Martin Daubney, here on GB News. Now, 5 former Defence Secretaries turned their fire on the Labour Party last night of what they called their reckless plans to delay a vital military spending boost. They've warned that Britain could lose the next war without an urgent cash boost for the armed forces. Now, Defence Minister Luke Pollard insisted that Labour's commitment to hit 2.5% of GDP was cast iron, but refused to put a timeline on the target once again. We can now speak with the former Chief of the General Staff of the British Army, and that is Lord Dannatt. Lord Dannatt, welcome to the show. An absolute pleasure to have your company. So, being typically straight-talking, you branded these plans as outrageous, and the amount of money the Labour Party are offering only enough to fill in potholes. Tell us more.
Well, I think what you've just described is about right. The current spend on defence is 2.3%, with inflation running the sort of figure that it is, and defence inflation runs above normal inflation. It actually means that without putting more money into defence, then in fact the buying power of the defence budget actually is going down on a month-by-month, year-on-year basis. So that's the bottom line of the push to go to 2.5%. But the previous government had put a timeline on that, 2.5% by 2030. Now, the advantage of that was that defence planners and programmers could actually then do their calculations and work out how to spend the increased money, and more critically, place orders with defence industry to buy the ammunition and the weapons and things that are urgently needed. But I'm afraid on the face of it, even 2.5% is not enough by a country mile. When you just look cursorily around the world, issues between China and the US over Taiwan, the ongoing conflicts in the Middle East, and most critically from our point of view, the ongoing war in Ukraine. And then throw in that, Donald Trump now saying that really countries should be spending 5% of GDP on defence. So there's a lot for the government to think about, and just saying that they'll go to 2.5%, but don't know when. And in fact, it's been mooted, it might not be till 2032. Frankly, that is outrageous. It is reckless. And those five former defence secretaries are absolutely on the money.
Lord Dannett, do you think this timeline might suddenly change when Donald Trump comes along and says, look, it's going to be 5%, lads, otherwise, I don't know, there's going to be some huge tariff against Britain. He seems to be playing hardball, and he's serious, is he not, about the huge financial contribution that the US has always made towards NATO. Many European countries dragging their heels. Has to be said, the UK not doing as bad as others. But Donald Trump seems to be in the mood to get things done quickly, and that could be 5%, could be a very, very expensive bill for the Labour Party, and I don't suppose they'll be able to ignore Donald Trump.
Well, you're absolutely right, and he has quite a track record of pushing European members of NATO to up their spending on defence, take a greater share of the burden on European defence, and frankly, that is right. Now, what is encouraging is that he's moderated his language of a few years ago by really criticising NATO and suggesting that the United States might withdraw from NATO. That would be a disaster from Europe's point of view. But when he talks about 5%, this isn't a figure he just plucked out of the air. If we go back to the mid-late 1980s, towards the end of the Cold War, that's what we were spending on defence then, just under 5% of GDP on our defence budget. And of course, the thing to reflect on is because we had that right spend on defence, we deterred the Soviet Union, we deterred the Warsaw Pact, and the Cold War never went hot. So that's the level of spend that he believes, and I think he's right, that we ought to be aspiring to. Now, we can't get there very, very quickly, but we could certainly move through 2.5 to 3, I think to 3.5% over the next 5 years by the next election, notwithstanding all the other things Rachel Reeves has got to fund. This is what the nation needs for our own security and what Europe needs for our collective security.
OK, we'll leave it there. We're simply running out of time. Thanks for coming on the show. It's always an absolute pleasure. That's the former head of the British Army, Lord Dannett. Thank you very, very much for joining us today on GB News. Now, loads of you have been getting in touch throughout the show. I've got time to read out a quick couple of comments now. Grumpy Grandad says this: can anyone point out anything that Keir Starmer is doing that's going to benefit the nation? Because I'm trying to look on the positive side of things and I'm failing badly. Gordon says this: Keir Starmer won't leave the World Health Organization or the European Court of Human Rights. And Linda adds this: I'm worried about immigration. I can't get a doctor's appointment as it is. Now, a lot of people agree with that. And talking of which, astonishing data released today predicts the UK will be flooded with almost 10 million additional immigrants in the next 8 years. Ben Habib joins me next to discuss that. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's News Channel. Now, here's your weather.
A chilly start will give way to a lovely, warm afternoon. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, good afternoon. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. As we head into tonight, showers should largely ease away. Plenty of dry weather as we get into tomorrow, though it is going to be turning rather cloudy and wet across the far south. And the reason for this unsettled spell of weather, well, it's all thanks to low pressure largely dominating the weather, but we do have a ridge of high pressure starting to build in tomorrow. For tonight, though, there are still going to be plenty of showers around to start with, still with a warning in force across southern parts of Wales, but showers should largely ease away, becoming more confined to parts of Scotland, Northern Ireland, perhaps still a fair few showers across parts of Wales too, but a few more clear skies overnight, lighter winds, so that means temperatures are going to dip away, so a slightly chillier night compared to recent nights. To start off tomorrow, once again, there should be plenty of dry weather around, still plenty of showers feeding into the north, but it's across the south where we need to keep an eye on. Clouds starting to edge into the southwest here, still a few showers feeding into parts of Wales, western parts of Northern Ireland too, and still plenty of showers, if not longer spells of rain across parts of Scotland, particularly across the northeast, where they're likely still falling as snow across hills, and still quite blustery down these northeastern coasts of Scotland too. Through the course of the day, not much change. That's away from the far south, however. Still plenty of cloud moving in here. Some outbreaks of rain just starting to edge southern coasts. It's going to be quite a wet and windy day across the Channel Islands. To the north of this, though, plenty of dry weather around. They still can't rule out those showers, particularly around coasts of Northern Ireland and parts of Scotland. Temperatures around about average for the time of year. Slightly milder to the south, though, that being offset by some wet and windy weather just around far southern coasts. That will then edge away eastwards, moving into Sussex and Kent by the evening. Once again, there should be plenty of dry weather as we head into tomorrow night. Still a fair few showers across the north, though. A much nicer day on Thursday, plenty of sunshine around before further rain as we head towards the weekend.
A nice bright morning will generate a lovely warm day, right through to the evening. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Alan Wright. In Warwickshire, the M6 northbound is partly blocked after a collision between Junction 3 for Coventry and Junction 3A for the M6 toll. Also in Warwickshire, the M42 northbound is partly blocked after a collision between Junction 9 for Curdworth and Junction 10 for the A5 and Tamworth. In Cumbria, the M6 northbound is partly blocked after a breakdown. It's between Carlisle North at Junction 44 and the Gretna Green turn-off at Junction 45. In Buckinghamshire, delays on the clockwise M25 after a collision. It's happened just before Junction 16 for the M40, with queues all the way back round past Junction 15 for the M4.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
This is the final week to grab your chance to win our biggest cash prize so far, £50,000 in tax-free cash. How would you react if you won?
We won 25,000. I'd say don't hesitate, do it. If you're not in it, you've got no chance of winning it.
Don't miss out as lines close on Friday. For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. You can call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB10 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 31st of January. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive?
Incompetent? I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Very, very good afternoon to you. It's 5 p.m. Welcome to the Martin Daubney Show here on GB News. We're broadcasting for you live from the heart of Westminster and all across the UK. On today's show, astonishing data released today predicts that the UK will be flooded with almost 10 million additional immigrants in the next 8 years, swelling our population to an incredible 72.5 million. I'll be joined in the studio by the heavy hitter Ben Habib to ask him, is it time to declare a state of immigration emergency? And a shock new report by the Children's Commissioner has found that precisely none of the under-18s arrested in last summer's riots were spurred on by misinformation, racism or other right-wing influences. So why on earth did Sir Keir Starmer and the entire government and establishment media machine make this baseless claim for the entire summer? Talking of which, a leaked Home Office report claims right-wing extremists frequently exploit the grooming gang scandal, which, by the way, they think should be renamed as alleged group-based sexual abuse to promote anti-Muslim sentiments. I'll be joined by a common sense police and crime commissioner to ask her, are the Home Office completely losing the plot? Welcome to the show. 10 million more immigrants coming into the United Kingdom in the next 8 years. 10 million. That is a London and a Birmingham, and on a good day, a Manchester on top. How on earth are we going to house those people? 1.5 million houses building by the Labour Party over the next term, completely eviscerated, gone at the drop of a hat just by those coming in the front door, let alone arriving here illegally. 5 years ago tomorrow, we finally voted in Brussels to leave the European Union. Myself and this fella sat here, Ben Habib. We pressed the button in Brussels, we thought, to finally get the job done. No one listened. The entire establishment simply refused to listen to what we, all the electorate, said. Will they ever change their tune? Have they got the guts to actually take on the immigration problem, or is it just the same old merry-go-round? Get in touch the usual way, gbnews.com/you'll say. But now's your headlines, and here's Sam Francis.
Very good evening to you. It's just after 5 o'clock. The top story tonight, the UK population could hit 72.5 million people by 2032, driven almost entirely by net migration. According to the ONS, net migration will contribute 340,000 extra people each year from 2028. That's up from 315,000 in earlier estimates. The government, though, says it will present a comprehensive plan to reduce what it calls staggeringly high migration levels, but has ruled out a fixed cap. Well, the Shadow Home Secretary Chris Philps says that projected 10 million arrivals over the next decade is unacceptable and must be stopped.
Forecasts the ONS put out are completely unacceptable. They don't need to happen and they should not happen. What Kemi Badenoch and I have said is there should be a legally binding annual cap on the number of visas that we issue to get these numbers right down. You know, we have 9 million working age people here in the UK that are not in the workforce. We need to see those people getting to work, and we need to see more investment in technology and mechanisation instead of importing very large numbers of low-skill wages. That is not the right thing to do. We need to see change, and we've got a plan to do that.
The driver of a car that crashed into a school tea party, sadly killing 2 8-year-old girls, has been rearrested on suspicion of causing death by dangerous driving. Claire Fremantle was previously told she wouldn't face charges after suffering an epileptic seizure that caused the crash in Wimbledon. The Met Police has reopened its investigation following concerns from the families of Nuria Sajjad and Selina Lau. Their parents say it's vital the investigation continues in pursuit of truth and the full facts. The family of Leicester City's late owner has called the helicopter crash that killed him and a number of others on board an accident waiting to happen. The inquest, which wrapped up today, ruled the deaths accidental, revealing that the helicopter's tail rotor failed, causing it to spiral out of control. His family has now filed a £2 billion legal claim against helicopter maker Leonardo, accusing them of engineering failures. Leonardo, though, says it will defend that claim, insisting the helicopter met all safety standards. Cardiff University plans to cut 400 full-time jobs due to a funding shortfall. Nursing, music and modern languages are among the subjects set to be axed, with school closures and mergers also on the table. The University College Union says it will fight compulsory redundancies, but the university insists they will only happen if it's absolutely necessary. The UK has pledged an extra £17 million in humanitarian aid to Gaza, with a focus on food, water, healthcare and on sanitation. Earlier, the Development Minister made an announcement in the House of Commons confirming that £2 million will also go towards restoring vital infrastructure. That comes as the fragile ceasefire in Gaza has now entered its second week and thousands of civilians are returning to the north of the territory. Annalise Dodds warned that Israel's ban on UN aid risks stalling the progress made and is calling for unrestricted access for humanitarian agencies. Well, Prince William has rolled up his sleeves for a very hands-on visit to an eco-friendly farm today. The Prince of Wales spent an hour getting stuck into sustainable farming, digging through a bin of worm-filled compost, and checking out a new grain store. He also explored solar panels and a community event space at the 630-acre farm, leading the way in cutting carbon emissions. The visit highlights the Duchy of Cornwall's ongoing commitment to greener farming practices. Rather him than me. And take a look at this. Boom Supersonic has set to the skies this evening in a historic test flight over the Mojave Desert, setting the stage for the return of supersonic travel. The flight could redefine air travel, pushing the boundaries of speed and marking a significant step towards breaking the sound barrier once again. The so-called XB-1 is expected to create a sonic boom potentially heard 30 miles away. And the milestone comes after previous test flights were successful, including one earlier this month where the jet reached 728 miles an hour. If today's test flight goes as planned, a new 64-seat supersonic jet known as Overture will soon take to the skies. Remarkable. Those are the latest GB News headlines. I'll be back with you in half an hour.
Thank you, Sam. They're laughing away in the studio already now. The UK's population is set to rise to 72.5 million by mid-2032. Incredible figures. Look at that. It's like an Elon Musk rocket taking off. The projection released by the Office for National Statistics today is driven almost entirely, in fact, it is entirely by net migration, with a 5 million increase in the next 10 years. But that's actually 10 million coming in and 5 million going out, with births and deaths basically on parity. And we can speak now with GB News' political editor Chris Hope. And also I'm joined in the studio by the chairman of the new Great British Political Action Committee and, of course, the former Reform UK deputy leader and Brexit policy MEP, Ben Habib. Gentlemen, welcome to the show. Chris, let's start with you. For the benefit of those tuning in for the first time, the numbers out today are simply astonishing. Here we go again. The lunatics have taken control of the asylum system. They said they'd take control of our borders, and they've utterly and abjectly and provably failed.
Martin, great to see you again. You're not quite right to say next 10 years. It's 2022 to 2032. So the first 4 years of that period, or 3 years, have been under the Tory government. Now, what happens here is the ONS have looked at current government policies and projected forward based on current policies. They're not predictions, they're projections. Now, if the government changes policy and a white paper, which is basically a law on net migration, is expected in coming months, these figures might well come down. I doubt they're going to go down to the level that you were talking about previous hour,
about me. I mean, the
fewer than 100,000 a year, but certainly they may well come down. The government itself, Keir Starmer's spokesman told us repeatedly, these are staggeringly high numbers. They said that when the Tories came in 2019, compared to when they left office, figures were 4 times bigger than when they came in. Chris Philp, the Tory Shadow Home Secretary, says this can and must be stopped from materialising, these figures over the next till 2032. And he says there should be a hard cap on visas each year, people like Ben Habib will say you've lost all right to dictate on this policy, Chris Philp, because of your failure over the past 14 years. Nigel Farage, the Reform leader, who I've been speaking to for his programme tonight, you'll see that live at 7 or on the channel at 7 p.m. tonight. He says our quality of life is declining due to the population explosion. It's the biggest issue facing our country. It's understood by the government. The question is, have they got the willpower to tackle it? We'll find out soon.
Well, I think we know the answer to that. Let's talk to Ben Habib about that now. Time and time again, government after government, Prime Minister after Prime Minister have made the same empty promises. Getting to the point now where it feels like the definition of insanity. We repeat the same thing and expect a different outcome. These numbers are astonishing. The numbers are going up and up and up. Do you think we will ever take back control?
Well, I mean, we can talk about that when we talk about the Great British Pact, because I think part of the problem here is a political class that simply doesn't have the courage to do the right thing for the United Kingdom. Every single sane-minded individual in this country knows we've got to put up our borders. We will cease to be a country if we don't do it. There was a poll, I think you would have seen the results in the Daily Telegraph yesterday, which polled 55% of British people want a border emergency called to shut down our borders, detain and deport people who are in this country illegally. 76% of Reform and Tory voters want that to be implemented. That was in the Telegraph, as I say. Yes, I see Christopher quickly fact-checking me, but it's true. And that's what the people want. But the political class isn't there. And when you talk about 5 million additional migrants coming to this country, as you rightly pointed out, that's the net figure. So when you talk about the cultural changes taking place, it's much bigger. It's more like 10 million. And that 10 million means you've got population replacement taking place. British cultural values are being set aside. Our nation is changing in a way that we couldn't begin to recognise it. And we're not moving forward as an integrated, settled, homogeneous culture or country. We're moving forward, as I've repeatedly said, and it is deeply dangerous, in silos of multiculturalism, where lots of different cultures, and it's not just Islam versus Christians, it's lots of different cultures that have come to this country, all operating independently of each other, all operating independently of the United Kingdom, and being given a regulatory and legal framework which protects them, which promotes them in doing all of that. And we saw how brilliantly Trump, on his first day, one of the first things he did, apart from saying the obvious that a man is a man and a woman is a woman, you know, what is our world come to when the President of the United States has to say that at his inauguration speech? But the next best thing he did was to get rid of affirmative action, progressive discrimination, this whole DEI nonsense. And DEI, coupled with this rampant immigration that we've got, is going to be the end of this country.
It is not, though, is it? I mean, it's not going to be the end of this country. I mean,
it'll be the end of the country as we know it.
ECHR is why you can't deport, or these European courts. I mean, we can't just send them across back to where they came from without. Your plan is to leave the ECHR first, I suppose.
So I mean, there are a number of things we can do. Suella Braverman, when she first drafted the Illegal Migration Act, when it was a bill, it required the Secretary of State to detain and then deport. When it became an act, it actually the Secretary of State has the option to detain and deport. Now, they're two very different sets of wording, and the first wording was the correct wording, and we should have gone with it. There is nothing to prohibit us, Christopher, from detaining every illegal migrant in this country. Nothing. There is nothing obliging us to put them up in hotels to come and go as freely as they want. Next door in Altrincham, you'll remember the story a few months ago, a hotel was taken over next door to a child's girls' school. I mean, how insane is that? And then if something untoward were to happen, you'd get Keir Starmer on the airwaves chastising the people of Altrincham, categorising them as far-right, and blaming them for what followed. What we've got to do is settle this country. This country is not settled. And if we want to have an understanding of where we're going, if we don't settle it, all we have to do is look across the channel and look at what's happening in France. Every time there's anything between any ethnicity, and they've got multiple ethnicities like we have, but they've got a much bigger problem, France goes ablaze, from Marseille to Calais. there's inter-ethnic violence, draconian policing then being deployed, and I can see that being called for in this country. We don't want draconian policing. We want the root of the problem addressed, so we don't need draconian policing.
All right, Ben Habib, you have launched something, you're the co-founder, I believe, of something called the Great British Political Action Committee, the Great British PAC. This, of course, following the PAC movements in the United States. There's an article out today saying, could Ben Habib be the man to unite the riots? But surely to do that, you've got to stop falling out with Nigel Farage.
Listen, I love Nigel. I don't know what Nigel thinks of me, but I love Nigel. It's not about friends, political allies, comrades. It's not about that. The Great British Political Action Committee is about country before party, and it has three principal aims. The first is to shift the centre of gravity of acceptable political discourse in this country to one that is anti the liberal global order, to one that puts the United Kingdom first, believes in strong borders, and will champion an independent, sovereign, prosperous United Kingdom.
Now, I noticed that you signed a letter the other week, and the signatures of that letter were very interesting. So Nigel Farage was one of them, Sir Jacob Rees-Mogg was one of them, Suella Braverman was one of them. Is this a movement to unite the right of the Tory party and reform?
So this is a movement to do what's right by the country. Move the political discourse to a position where we can do the kinds of thing Trump is doing across the Atlantic. That's the first thing. The second thing is to create policies, and we're going to have a platform which are grassroots-based, people of the United Kingdom feeding policies back to us at the top of the pack, and we will then use that to empirically support or set aside policies that we've got, form new policies. And then the third aspect, of course, is you can have all the best purpose, you can have the best policies, but if you don't have the right people, you won't be able to deliver them. So the third bit of the pack is going to be identifying people who can be future leaders, MPs, training them, getting them ready to take office.
So are you a party? We in the UK, we don't understand what PACs are. You're not. So you're doing what you criticise Reform for being, which is a company, or...
No. We're not. We will not be standing candidates. Right. We will be setting the discourse based on the democratic wishes of people's policies coming to us from the grassroots. Okay. And then we will be using that to move the centre of gravity of political debate so that basic things like calling a border emergency can be done by our political class, ditching DEI, ditching net zero. And then we're going to pressure. So uniting the right is not about pleading with Nigel to get on with Kemi or with Kemi to get on with Nigel. It's about pressuring both the Conservative Party and Reform UK to stay true to the people of this country.
OK, gentlemen, we have to leave it there, but stick around. I want to bring in my next guest now. That's the lecturer in sustainable construction and climate change, John Grant. John, it's been way, way too long. Happy Christmas, Happy New Year, and all the rest of it. So You've heard us go through this data today. It's simply astonishing. 10 million extras coming to Britain in the next 8 years. That's completely unsustainable, is it not?
There's a lot of rounding going on here. You know, I've got to say that the data you're looking at is from, and one of your speakers just said, from 2022 to 2032. We're actually in 2025 now, which actually means that of that 4.9, we've already gained about 1.5 million people. So a significant proportion of that 4.9 has already been grown, and I don't see it. You know, so before we start sort of losing our heads over
those are the numbers.
4.9 growth, we're already solidly into that, and we're managing.
We are, which we all. Go on.
So thanks for the time. But so I think you don't want to sort of go off half-cocked here in that 4.9. First of all, that's 100,000 less than 5. So please stop rounding it up to 5. 100,000 people is a lot of people. And
there'll be more than 100,000 people here that we haven't been able to track. But on you go.
Yeah, well, we have. I mean, these are the numbers. You wanted to use the numbers. So, 4.9 minus the 1.6-ish growth that we've had since 2022. It's a much smaller number to manage. Then the people that are coming in tend to be young, fit. They want to work. The actual immigrants that want to work, they're the sort of people that we want in our economy if we're going to grow it. We've got an aging population. We need to look after those. And, young, fit people bringing money and effort and energy into our economy is part of what a growing economy looks like. My family came over in that. decades ago and added to this country. We're a different culture, and we added to this country.
John, I hate to rain on your parade, but again, the facts tell us that it's around about 15% of immigrants since 2018 have come here to work. The vast majority are students or family members, and there are a growing number that aren't working. It's going through the roof. And of those that do come, they tend to be ostensibly lower skilled, lower paid, that contribute less. That is the fact of the matter.
Yeah, we do have, but we have a shortage of those since we stopped letting those kind of people come across from free movement in Europe. We are struggling a little at those lower income groups, and I just think that there is another side to this argument. And first of all, rounding it up to 10 million immigrants is just terrifying when we're the number isn't that at all. In though that when you have to look at the net growth of our country, not the total number of foreigners, which is really uncomfortable when it's caged like they're kind of the enemy. No, I'm not the enemy.
John, facts aren't racist, numbers aren't racist. Immigration numbers, 9.914 million, so yes, 86,000 shy. There are a million people in Britain that we have no idea where they are and who they are, and that's the Home Office's own estimate. So 86,000, not worth arguing about. John Grant, always a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you very, very much indeed for your time today. Thanks to Ben Habib, and thanks to Chris Hope. Now, moving quickly on, time is running out, not just for these two, but for your chance to become our biggest ever giveaway winner with an incredible £50,000 in your bank account. And of course, that is totally tax-free to spend however you want. Make sure that you don't miss out.
There's just 3 days left to grab your chance to win our biggest cash prize so far, £50,000 in tax-free cash. How would you react if you won?
It's such a nice feeling.
Just go for it.
It's one text, and if I can win, anyone can win.
I was on cloud nine.
I'd say don't hesitate, do it.
For another chance to win £50,000 cash, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. You can call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB10 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Don't miss out as lines close on Friday. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Now it's time to wave bye-bye to your British pies. Yes, pie and mash shops are under threat. It's time to call the Pie Minister. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Tom Harwood. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Lee Anderson's Real World, Fridays from 7 p.m.
That's football.
Well,
it's the hope that kills you.
It does. It gives you highs, it gives you lows. I mean, if you're an Everton fan at the moment, you probably had far too many lows. But as you know, I'm a Nottingham Forest fan.
Well, you must be having a huge high.
But you had one of the greatest footballers ever to grace the game, right? And that was Dixie Dean.
Yeah, absolutely. William Ralph Dean. Didn't like being called Dixie, but that was his nickname. And he was born in 1907. He was my grandfather's best mate. I'm an Everton shareholder. I've been, attached to the club all my life, and so was my father, so was my grandfather, our greatest ever player.
So back in the day when players like Dixie Dean were playing football for big crowds in, a proper...
72,000.
Yeah, a proper working class sport back in the day, weren't it, football? Not like it is today. You've got to be pretty wealthy to afford a ticket.
Even in the 70s, right, and I've seen some, I do like looking back on the football that I watched as a kid. even in the 70s now, I've seen pictures of the turnstiles, as we used to call them, with a sign at the top, 5 shillings for the Eastern Terrace. 5 shillings. Yeah. Last time I turned down a ticket to go to a football match was Arsenal, who wanted me to pay £830 for a seat in an executive lounge. And though I could have afforded it, because I've worked all my life like you, I just thought at that point, that's ridiculous.
Well, you should have told him you were Keir Starmer's security man. You'd have probably got him for nothing.
Yeah, well, that's a good idea. Yeah.
But you go back to the the 1930s and 1940s, even the 1960s and 70s. You know, the footballers would walk to the ground and play a game, and then walk back and go for a few beers in the pub.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Pearce. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 5:25 with me, Martin Daubney, here on GB News. Now, from crust to dust. Who writes this? Because London's pie and mash shops are at risk of becoming as rare as Cockney rhyming slang. The Pie and Mash Club, a society for the cuisines enthusiasts, have found that there are now fewer than 40 pie and mash shops in London, down from only 300 in the mid-19th century. Well, join us now as GB News' pie and mash correspondent, Adam Cherry. Adam, I knew at some point you'd be joining the upper crust. And here you are. Pie shops are on death row, but you're doing your bit to keep them alive and kicking. Tell us more.
Yeah, that's right, Martin. As you said, pie shops like this. I'm on Tower Bridge Road in M Menzies. This is a unique place not just because so many of shops like this are closing en masse throughout London, but this shop in particular, this eel and pie shop, first opened in 1892. It's been going for a very, very long time. And the demographic changes and the taste changes over the last few decades means that, yeah, as you said, these aren't as common as they used to be. But I am doing my bit, and I haven't got a pie this time. I did some coverage on a similar shop a couple of months ago when we were covering Conservative MP Richard Holden's coverage on this stuff. I don't have a pie this time. I have eels. I've never tried eels before, but in the name of good journalism, Martin, as always, we're going to give this a go. So apparently there's a bone in here, so I hope you can see this. We've got some jelly and we've got a bit of eel. So here we go, live taste test of some jellied eels for you on GB News, the People's Channel. Here we go. I'll do a voiceover. Now they're quite bony. The bone runs central down the middle. Be careful. Don't be an amateur. You're meant to pick the bone off the central spine. And they're quite fishy, aren't they? Yeah. This is now turning into. There is a bone in there. There is a bone in there. This is now turning into a Bush Tucker trial, Adam Cherry. You're not a fan of the eel. I'll just move that. I'll move that slightly aside because the eel was lovely, but you're right. I was quite naive. I didn't know there'd be a bone in there, so just ignore that. They're lingering on the plate there. Very nice, nonetheless. Now, as I said, this one has been open for a very long time, but another sort of sister site to this one closed. Sorry, I got a little bit of eel in my teeth. Another sister site to this one closed just last Saturday, and it closed its doors for the last time. It's a generational thing as well, so again, there's more eel in my teeth, but I'll carry on. It's a generational thing, so it's in the family for all these decades, but it's obviously a lot of hard work, up at 5 a.m, fresh ingredients every day, and there's a slight attitude change towards it. Now, we're doing our bit here. I think it's a nice tradition. There's a sense of community here, sense of history. People come in here and they're regulars. It's a nice atmosphere. It's good fun. It's authentic, and it's very London. It's very East End. So we are here fighting the good fight. I've even joined the Appreciation Society, which is this badge here, and we're doing our bit to keep them running whilst we can, Martin. I've got to say, Adam Cherry, if it makes you feel any better, I'm not the biggest fan of eels. I do like the two pie, the double pie. They go crust side down. They slap them in the mash. You have your peas on the side. Of course, you don't have gravy. You have liquor. Pie, mash and liquor. I go to the one in Peckham on the way down to the Millwall. We go in the Millwall match, watch Forest annihilate them. But I do like a pie and mash. But as you say, these days, people seem to have more, how should I put it, cosmopolitan tastes. Everyone's into your kind of Lebanese, your kebab joints and whatnot. The pie
Why a mass shop is it a legacy issue? There are fewer and fewer cockneys about, and so their cuisine is dying out with them.
Yeah, a lot of them are moving out towards Kent, Sussex, Essex, and so it is less popular. Like you said, they're competing with the likes of Deliveroo, who have got all sorts of cuisine, but these guys are on the delivery services, so if you fancy a pie, you fancy a bit of eel, I know I haven't done the best demonstration of eating it, but if you want it, you can get it. It's still available. I think whilst it's here, we should enjoy it, Martin.
Now, Adam Cherry, just because I can do this, please, I'm going to make you eat another eel. Get it down, your son. Go on, you've had one, you can do another one.
OK.
I'm feeling masochistic here.
So what
using his fork this time, look.
I'm trying to... I'm going to put this down for a second, because I haven't got a knife on me, so let's just...
Go on, get stuck in, son.
That's fine.
Here he goes. He's using his fingers. Not bad. You go.
Finger food.
Yeah, finger food. Go on, get it down. You're taking the bone off. What do you reckon? Quite fishy, aren't they? He likes it. Thumbs up. He's got his mouth full. He can't even say bye-bye. Adam Cherry, beautiful. He's choking away. It was more like a Bush Tucker challenge. Moving on from Joan Collins to whoever that is, so many of the most famous women in Hollywood are known for dating younger men. But they're not alone in liking toy boys, because a scientific study has confirmed that women really are drawn to younger men, whether they realise it or not. And that's me done. Most of my people then, my fan base will be almost dead. Well, earlier on, we asked the lovely women of Glasgow to see if this was a correct theory.
Do you ever consider yourself going for a toy boy?
No.
No. Why not? Absolutely. You know,
I've never leant that way. I've always preferred an older man, more mature. I would find a younger man too immature for me.
Well, I would prefer an older man.
An older man, why is that?
I think I've got more life experience.
It depends on a lot of things. It depends on personality and if you have a lot in common. You know, do you think age is such a small part of it then? I don't think age has anything to do with it.
A lot of single people out there, I would just wonder what you would see in an older woman. Maybe a mother figure, which I wouldn't be happy with. That's how you saw me.
So the story was, do you prefer younger men? And Tony Maguire asked, let's face it, a bunch of pensioners, and they all said, no, we prefer older men. They certainly do like them ripe north of the border. Now, there's lots more still to come between now and 6 o'clock, and I mean that in the nicest possible sense, because a new report claims that children who joined the riots that followed the Southport attacks did it just for fun. And guess what? They weren't far right after all. But first is your headlines with Sam Francis.
Very good evening to you. It's just after 5:30. The top story tonight. The UK population could hit 72.5 million people by 2032, driven almost entirely by net migration. According to the Office for National Statistics, net migration will contribute 340,000 extra people every year from 2028. That's up from 315,000 in earlier estimates. Well, the government says it will present a comprehensive plan to reduce what is called the staggeringly high migration levels, but has ruled out a fixed cap. The Scottish Government has launched a review of child protection following the conviction of 7 members of a Glasgow child abuse ring. That case, which saw 3 children subjected to horrific abuse in a drug den, has raised serious questions about how authorities failed to act despite clear signs of neglect and school absences. Children's Minister Natalie Don Inez says that the situation is a horrifying failure and stressed the need for urgent action. MSPs, including the Alba Party, have questioned whether child safeguarding in Scotland is fit for purpose. But the government has vowed to ensure that lessons are learned and that such abuse never happens again. The government is reportedly considering a major shake-up to how the BBC is funded, with households using streaming services like Netflix and Disney potentially being hit with the licence fee. It's reported the idea is part of a menu of options under discussion, including a tax on streaming services or asking BBC radio listeners to also pay the fee. Ministers say they're also exploring alternatives like advertising or a subscription model as viewing habits shift away from traditional TV. No decisions, though, have been made so far, and discussions are still in the early stages, with more details expected closer to 2027. Prince William has been rolling up his sleeves for a very hands-on visit to an eco-friendly farm today. The Prince of Wales spent an hour getting stuck into sustainable farming. He even tried digging through a bin full of worms and compost. And he checked out a new grain store. He also explored solar panels and a community event space at the 630-acre farm, leading the way in cutting carbon emissions. The visit highlights the Duchy of Cornwall's ongoing commitment to greener farming practices. And in a remarkable feat, Boom Supersonic has set the skies today in a historic test flight over the Mojave Desert, setting the stage for the return of supersonic travel. The flight could redefine how we set through the skies, pushing the boundaries of speed and marking a significant step towards once again breaking the sound barrier. The XB-1 is expected to create a sonic boom and potentially will be heard 30 miles away. The milestone comes after 11 successful test flights, including one earlier this month, where the jet managed to reach 720 miles an hour. Well, if all goes planned today, a new 64-seat supersonic jet will soon take to the skies, marking the first of its kind since the Concorde. Those are the latest headlines. I'll be back with you in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hello there, good afternoon. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. As we head into tonight, showers should largely ease away. Plenty of dry weather as we get into tomorrow, though it is going to be turning rather cloudy and wet across the far south. And the reason for this unsettled spell of weather, well, it's all thanks to low pressure largely dominating the weather, but we do have a ridge of high pressure starting to build in tomorrow. For tonight, though, there are still going to be plenty of showers around to start with, still with a warning in force across southern parts of Wales, but showers should largely ease away, becoming more confined to parts of Scotland, Northern Ireland, perhaps still a fair few showers across parts of Wales too, but a few more clear skies overnight, lighter winds, so that means temperatures are going to dip away, so a slightly chillier night compared to recent nights. To start off tomorrow, once again, there should be plenty of dry weather around, still plenty of showers feeding into the north, but it's across the south where we need to keep an eye on. Clouds starting to edge into the southwest here, still a few showers feeding into parts of Wales, western parts of Northern Ireland too, and still plenty of showers, if not longer spells of rain across parts of Scotland, particularly across the northeast, where they're likely still falling as snow across hills, and still quite blustery down these northeastern coasts of Scotland too. Through the course of the day, not much change. That's away from the far south, however. Still plenty of cloud moving in here. Some outbreaks of rain just starting to edge southern coasts. It's going to be quite a wet and windy day across the Channel Islands. To the north of this, though, plenty of dry weather around. They still can't rule out those showers, particularly around coasts of Northern Ireland and parts of Scotland. Temperatures around about average for the time of year. Slightly milder to the south, though, that being offset by some wet and windy weather just around far southern coasts. That will then edge away eastwards, moving into Sussex and Kent by the evening. Once again, there should be plenty of dry weather as we head into tomorrow night. Still a fair few showers across the north, though. A much nicer day on Thursday, plenty of sunshine around before further rain as we head towards the weekend.
The latest GB News travel.
Good evening, I'm Johnny Ratner. Problems in West Lothian on the M8. The inside lane is closed westbound from junction 3 to 3A north of Livingston, where a collision is being recovered. And in Lincolnshire, midway between Grimsby and Caister, the A46 has been shut at Irby upon Humber at the scene of a serious collision. There are long queues on the M5 southbound to the northwest of Bristol, where one lane's closed at junction 16 at Aztec West following an accident involving a lorry. And in Devon, the A39 has been shut between Barnstaple and Bideford at the scene of a multi-vehicle collision. In Carmarthenshire at Larne, the Church Street, that's still blocked off by an accident. Gatwick Express still can't run between Victoria and Brighton. And on London Underground, there are severe delays on the Metropolitan line from Harrow on the Hill to Aldgate following a track fault at Wembley Park. And that's the very latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Welcome back. Your time is 5:38 with me, Martin Daubney, here on GB News. Now, the Children's Commissioner says that teenagers who got involved in the summer riots for the fun and the thrill of the moment, according to her, because 147 children were arrested last September after violence broke out nationwide in the days and the weeks following the murders of 3 children in Southport by Axel Rudder-Cabana. Well, joining us now is the Police and Crime Commissioner for Hampshire and the Isle of Wight, Donna Jones. Donna, welcome to the show. This report's caught my eye because, you know, if we believe the Prime Minister, if we believe what we're being told by the Merseyside Police Force, everybody involved in the backlash against the triple murder in Southport was a member of the far right. A lot of us said that's probably not very fair. A lot of people were just concerned about their local communities, not defending any of the rioters, of course. But now this report from the Children's Commissioner says actually they weren't racist after all. They weren't from the far right. And I wondered how this tallies with your experience, your knowledge of those who get swept up in disturbances like this.
Well, Martin, thanks for having me on to talk about a really important issue. Again, you know, the Southport riots were definitely one of the things that rocked towns and cities and certainly police forces up and down the country last summer. This report today by Dame Rachel D'Souza, the Independent Children's Commissioner, well, I really welcome it because what she's done with common sense today is tell us what we all already knew, was that children that were taking to the streets were not doing it because of some far-right ideological belief. A lot of them wouldn't even know what an ideology is. They wouldn't better tell you what far right is from far left. They weren't doing it for any kind of political or ideological purposes, and that's what the report has confirmed. They were doing it because of disenfranchised communities. They were doing it because there's not enough youth provision. They were doing it because there was a perception of perhaps being against police forces, and there is some work clearly there for police forces to do. But this was not about far right, and I think today this is embarrassing for the government and really should be yet another wake-up call for them in light of the Axel Rudder-Cabana sentencing last week and what has now come to light with his extreme behaviours and his reports into the Prevent programme and other professional agencies.
You know, Donna Jones, what I found really astonishing about that summer of disturbance was 7 towns were some of the most socially deprived towns in all of Britain. A lot of them are very, very Labour voting. I mean, in Liverpool, you know, the far-right capital of Britain, of course it's not. It's a very left-leaning part of the country. How damaging, may I ask you, do you think it's been for police forces and for the government to just brandish everybody who seems to disagree with them these days as being right-wing?
Well, I think it is. I think it's naive. You know, there are a lot of things the government are doing that I really support. Their Safer Streets mission, some of the police reform things that Yvette Cooper's currently working through. She has my full support. But some of the naivety that's coming out from some government ministers and sadly from Number 10 is really worrying. Now, if you look at some of the most recent comments in the last 24 hours, that people who talk about 2-tier policing would be deemed to be extremist. Well, Martin, that would be you and I, and probably 90% of the people that appear on GB News. I don't consider you and I in any way extremist. I do consider us as talking about common sense in this country and reflecting the views of a lot of the people that, well, 2.1 million people that I represent and the people that you represent that write into you. There have to be lessons learned, not just for policing, but also very much for the government on the handling of this situation. And you'll recall that about 8 or 9 days after the tragedy of what happened in Southport, I put a statement out and I was vilified by some in this country for talking about British values and the causation of why some of those people had taken to the streets to protest, not the rioters. I'm not interested in talking on behalf of people that set fire to police vans, police cars, assault police officers, or throw bricks through windows and set buildings on fire. I'm not interested in being their voice. But there are a lot of lawful people that took to the streets to have their say. And as you've just said, many of those people that have grown up and live in predominantly Labour towns and cities in the north of the country, they were not doing that because of any extremist views. They were doing it because they were dissatisfied about British values and what had been going on in this country. And that was the last straw that broke the camel's back around what had happened in Southport and a breakdown in society. So lots of lessons to be learned. In terms of the children, you know, 147 of them arrested, 84 given sentences. One of them as young as, I think, 11 or 12 sent, and one of them also sent to prison for 8 months. Some of those prison sentences were quite harsh. Now, I'm not trying to mitigate on behalf of some of those youngsters who did commit some really bad crimes, but it was a very, very robust response. And we've seen people sent to prison also for sharing things on social media. The whole thing has been a bit of a disaster, and there are many, many lessons for Number 10 to learn.
Donna Jones, common sense spoken. And I want to share a couple of pictures with you here and the viewers that I've been sent. These are friends of mine, their children, from Aldershot. These are children. They weren't rioting. They weren't far right. There's a child with obviously disguised her identity. That sign that she's holding up says, "Am I far right, Mr. Starmer?" Of course she isn't. Let's move on to the next picture, please. This is a young girl in the Aldershot area. This young girl was arrested and got involved with the police. She was one of the ones who were questioned, and this is her turning up to her local asylum hotel, and you can see she's holding up a placard which says, "Our women and children are vulnerable too." She went there because she cares about her community. She's worried about the safety of people in that community, including herself and her classmates and young people in the community. She got involved in this trouble as it flared up and ended up being visited by social services. I've got another picture to put on screen here. This is a message I got from her guardian today. It's about the fact that she was visited. Here we go. I had the social workers around today to interview us and the kids. And in their words, they were making sure their child wasn't being radicalised. So, Donna Jones, it confirms what we've heard here, that the Children's Commissioner, the police, social services, they were jumping on these cases just to look for any form of racism, any form of radicalisation, any form of malintent. They didn't find a single piece of evidence of any of that in any of the children they commissioned, they interviewed or commissioned. And I just reaffirm your point, Donna Jones. It's not always far right to care about your country, especially when you're a child.
No, it's not. It's common sense. And actually, aren't we supposed to be encouraging young people to have a voice? Aren't we supposed to be encouraging them to have their say? Aren't they our future leaders, our future barristers, solicitors, doctors, nurses, teachers? You know, we shouldn't be trying to stifle them. I have a youth commission in my force. I have a youth independent advisory group who help me to shape policing policy on behalf of the voice of the 650,000 young people, one of which is that young girl, the images you've just showed. Aldershot is in my patch. It's in Hampshire. I am the police commissioner that represents that area. And, you know, I really do think that there is a real wake-up call coming, I think, for the Labour government here, in that keep using this far-right terminology. Well, actually, we've had incidents in across the south of England where there have been protests going on around Islamophobia and other things. And actually, on those scenarios, the police are planning for the backlash that's likely to come from counter-protests on the keep refugees here, bring them into the country and help them and support them. And actually, some of the scenarios, it's not all on what people might perceive to be the right, and I'm not categorising it as that, but on the right, they're causing the trouble. Sometimes the trouble is coming from those that people might categorise on the left as well. The police have to look at both sides here, but unfortunately, the current government are stigmatising anyone who they has a view against them as being far right, and that's just not the case.
We have to go. Excellently put. Thank you. Always a pleasure. That's the Police and Crime Commissioner for Hampshire and the Isle of Wight, Donna Jones. Magnificent. Now, moving on. If you're in search of some winter sun this year, who can blame you? Here is the forecast for some of the top European holiday destinations.
Dinner under the stars tonight?
That reminds me of our travel insurance.
You mean all clear skies?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations forecast.
Another weather system pushing into parts of Western Europe will bring some further heavy rain and strong winds as we go through tomorrow across parts of Western France, much of Spain and Portugal. It is looking wet and there will be some hill snow around too. Also some wet weather affecting southern Italy, feeding into Greece as well. That being said, as we go through later this week, most places will see something a bit drier and also some decent warmth at times too. So not a total washout of a week. Bye-bye.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations forecast.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it? Because the failure is...
You're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff.
Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood.
So join me on Jubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and this is GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
It's the body image thing that concerns me. It's young girls watching Love Island and really skinny girls and young boys
hit the gym, but after this, yeah.
Exactly. I mean, they're seeing perfect bodies on the screen.
You don't need to go in the gym, Maymoon. You look gorgeous as you are, love.
I know. You see, the reason I don't enter anything like that, Kerry, is you know
you're gonna win.
Exactly. And it's not fair. It's not fair, I think, on everybody else being there.
It's not fair.
No.
But Kerry, what do you think about the body image thing? You know, when you talk about your daughter, is that something that you'd worry about, her comparing herself to the likes of what she sees on the screen?
Now, this is where there's a conflict of interest for me, because I've been brought up in this industry since I was 17, so it's massively affected me. I mean, when you're put on the front cover of magazines after having a baby with a stretch mark in the circle of shame, you know, it does do a psychological effect on you. I think a lot of celebrities who have been around for so many years, as I have been affected by that. But everyone has to bear in mind, I've had my children. I'm in my 40s. I feel I'm entitled to have my tweaks and try and improve on what I think are going down south, and health and safety, tripping over any things that I don't want to be tripping over anymore. But I definitely do believe, I mean, majority of the young girls that go on Love Island, they all have the same big lips, the same big eyelashes, all the butt implants, and they're barely in their 20s. You know, it's if you go to the airport now, I remember going to the airport and I looked around and all the girls looked exactly the same.
GB News, the People's Channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back now. Let's finish the show on a bit of Brexit, because the humble sand deal is set to take centre stage for the first courtroom trade battle between the UK and the European Union since we left the European Union, of course. Now, the UK banned European vessels from catching the silvery fish in its North Sea waters to help protect marine wildlife that depend on it for food, like the puffins. But the EU is challenging the move, arguing it discriminates against them. Well, I can now speak with a fisherman, good friend of mine, Paul Lyons. Paul, welcome to the show. This is proof, is it not, that we never really took back control of our fishing waters. Sand eels are in British waters, they're British fish, and now the EU are hoovering them up, and we never took back control. Tell us more.
Well, that situation that developed in that court will be the one shining light for the future with us in Europe, because if we as an independent coastal state can't make laws and we can't uphold them laws, we never ever left Europe. They still control us. The Danes are the ones that harvest sand eels, and they turn them into bacon, more or less. They feed pigs with them, they make oil, and they feed chickens with them. That's a meal fish. That's not human consumption. But I can guarantee you, from 15 years old, the first fish I picked up and gutted, summer months, they've all got sand eels in them. That's the staple food of the North Sea. Now, we had a good decision to do that, because the Danes were taking 1 million tonne a year at one time. That weren't sustainable. At least the RSPB and everyone else got together and they secured a ban on exploiting sand eels. And fishermen should look to reap the benefits of that, because there's a bigger food source there. But did we ever leave Europe? I don't think so. And I'm very, very interested to see how we get on in that European court with this, because if we don't uphold that ban, we might as well all pack up as fishermen, because we never have took back full control. And with that, if they win that court case, it'll definitely show the fishing community that we're never going to take back control.
You know, Paul Lyons, I think you're absolutely right. Do you know, it's 5 years ago tomorrow that we finally voted to leave the EU. I pressed the button there in Brussels. Fishing was talismanic. Fishing was vital. Taking back control of our waters was something that people understood. It was tangible. I don't think we ever did. We're still going to weigh vast tonnages. And here we are again, Paul Lyons, still talking about a court battle over British fish with Brussels. Paul Lyons, thank you very, very much. We've simply run out of time. Got to leave you and love you and leave you. Paul, tight lines. Paul Lyons, always an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you. And that's all from me, but don't worry, because up next is Jubes and Co, the queen of primetime political debate. And then from 7, it's Farrow Tonight, presented by Christopher Hope. But there is an exclusive interview with the man himself, Nigel Farage. That's at 7. I'll see you tomorrow at 3, but now it's your weather. Have a great evening.
Heavy showers first thing will be followed by a warm, cosy day. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, good afternoon. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. As we head into tonight, showers should largely ease away. Plenty of dry weather as we get into tomorrow, though it is going to be turning rather cloudy and wet across the far south. And the reason for this unsettled spell of weather, well, it's all thanks to low pressure largely dominating the weather, but we do have a ridge of high pressure starting to build in tomorrow. For tonight, though, there are still going to be plenty of showers around to start with, still with a warning in force across southern parts of Wales, but showers should largely ease away, becoming more confined to parts of Scotland, Northern Ireland, perhaps still a fair few showers across parts of Wales too, but a few more clear skies overnight, lighter winds, so that means temperatures are going to dip away, so a slightly chillier night compared to recent nights. To start off tomorrow, once again, there should be plenty of dry weather around, still plenty of showers feeding into the north, but it's across the south where we need to keep an eye on. Clouds starting to edge into the southwest here, still a few showers feeding into parts of Wales, western parts of Northern Ireland too, and still plenty of showers, if not longer spells of rain across parts of Scotland, particularly across the northeast, where they're likely still falling as snow across hills, and still quite blustery down these northeastern coasts of Scotland too. Through the course of the day, not much change. That's away from the far south, however. Still plenty of cloud moving in here. Some outbreaks of rain just starting to edge southern coasts. It's going to be quite a wet and windy day across the Channel Islands. To the north of this, though, plenty of dry weather around. They still can't rule out those showers, particularly around coasts of Northern Ireland and parts of Scotland. Temperatures around about average for the time of year. Slightly milder to the south, though, that being offset by some wet and windy weather just around far southern coasts. That will then edge away eastwards, moving into Sussex and Kent by the evening. Once again, there should be plenty of dry weather as we head into tomorrow night. Still a fair few showers across the north, though. A much nicer day on Thursday, plenty of sunshine around before further rain as we head towards the weekend.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good evening, I'm Johnny Ratner. Big problems in Falkirk at Denny tonight for the A883, the Stirling Street. That's still closed after a building was deemed unsafe on Friday night. And in Lancashire on the M6, the two outside lanes are blocked off northbound just before junction 28, the Leyland turn-off at the scene of an accident in Lincolnshire, just west of Laceby. So this is between Grimsby and Caister, of course. The A46 at Irby upon Humber stays closed at the scene of an accident. Police are on scene. In Buckinghamshire at Aylesbury, the A413, the Buckingham Road remains shut at the scene of an accident just off Willow Road. Down in Devon, the A39 is shut between Biddeford and Barnstaple at the scene of a multi-vehicle collision. On public transport, still no Gatwick Express, and we're just hearing that trams have been suspended in Manchester between Media City UK and Cornbrook after a tram broke down at Harbour City. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
This is the final week to grab your chance to win our biggest cash prize so far, £50,000 in tax-free cash. How would you react if you won?
We won 25,000. I'd say don't hesitate, do it. If you're not in it, you've got no chance of winning it.
Don't miss out as lines close on Friday. For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. You can call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB10 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 31st of January. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/your say. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our